Let's get ready to RPG!
RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG! RPG!
Hello. Welcome to Shadowdeep. What's up, everybody? Welcome. Hey, so yeah, my internet is being potato tonight, and so I'm barely able to support this stream. We may end up getting some buffering issues, hopefully not. So I had to kill the Twitch stream because my internet bandwidth couldn't support me sending 2 stream bits out. So, in fact, it already looks a little choppy and terrible. So, great. You guys have to let me know if it looks bad for you guys as well. Anyways, that's where we're at. Nothing I can do. It's always like really like it. Honestly, like I'm convinced. You know, we just live in a simulation. But like I'll be like, oh, let me check my internet speed. You know, before I'm about to go live, and it's fine. And then I'll start streaming, and it'll just like literally like go to 0. So it's like I'm always like suspicious. I'm like, does my internet provider know that I'm doing some sort of live stream? And so you know. They like are throttling me because yeah, I don't know. You know, like I'm always just like that's the world that we live in. But yeah. Great. Well, love to hear it. Love to hear that the frames are choppy. Let me see if I can change something here. All right. Let's see if we can improve that. I'm just making some changes, lowering my bit rate. I did get my internet upgrade. Correct. I'm on fiber optic now. Normally, I have 500. 500. I mean, I'm supposed to get gigabit, right? So I'm supposed to have, in theoretically, I'm supposed to have a gigabit down and a gigabit up. Right now, I am rocking 10 megabits. So I'm getting what is that? 1% of my advertised. 1% of my advertised paid for things. So yeah. Anyways. And normally, YouTube for 1080p, which is what I normally stream at, YouTube recommends 6,000 kilobits, right, or 6 megabits up. But of course, I need other things for my up, because I'm still on the internet and all that other stuff. So it's usually good to have a little bit of headroom. So usually, in order to do 6 up, you need like 10, give or take. But when I stream to Twitch, that takes another 6 to 10. So I need 20. And I usually like to say I need 25. So anyways, right now, we're going to keep probably getting, whatever. In fact, I'm getting a message from YouTube saying, it is not receiving enough video quality from you to maintain a smooth stream. So that's cool. Let's see. I don't know what else I can do about this. I can just kill my bit rate. I guess I'll do that. All right. I will continue to lower my quality. And the beatings will continue until frame rate improves. So we'll just keep ticking my bit rate down. So normally I'm at 10,000, and now we're at 5. So, anyways, all right. Well, YouTube just sent me a message that the stream is healthy. Anyway, all right, good stuff. I'm glad it's Saturday night. It's only the hardest of core viewers are here, so I appreciate you. Yeah, I would expect the image quality, of course, is going to be fine. I mean, it might pixelate out, but yeah, I mean, frame rate's annoying though, so you do want to get, you do want good frame rate. Is this thing still dropping frames? No. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I would hope so. I mean, I'm hoping it's just some sort of weird, who knows what's going on. Anyways, most of them just delaying and waiting time to see if my drop frames stabilizes. It seems to be stable. It seems to be. Sometimes I get problems on YouTube, and then I'm like, I don't see anything, which means it's actually your problem. It's not like your problem. It's just like my YouTube is accepting my thing fine. It's just sending it over the internet, and it's getting fucked up before it gets to somebody. Maybe it's going through like a weird serverplex. But when I can see it, when I'm dropping frames, it means that it's a problem on my end for my internet. Anyways, drinking my soda. No way, monsters. Welcome. So yeah, we're going to continue here tonight with some Shadowdeep stuff. We might get all over the place, as we tend to do. Just because I got a lot of stuff in the fire and some interesting things here. Well, not interesting, but like there's some. It'll be a Shadowdeep stream. Don't yell at me. Although the tip goal tonight is only to give me the harshest critique. So if you tip me, you have to give me a harsh critique about myself. Because again, I watched. Well, I mean, number one, it's sort of an inside joke. It's an inside joke because Hodop and some other patrons were like, talk about something else. Talk about something new. You keep talking about the same stuff, and I'm like, I mean, that's just the way I think. I guess I don't know. I have to keep processing through things. If I had a quick, easy answer, the streams would be over very quickly indeed. But also, I was recently watching a new video from Destin Sandlin. He's Smarter Every Day, and he was talking about this quadrant thing. I'd never heard of it before. It's called I forgot the name of it. The Roubaud matrix or something. I don't remember exactly what it was called, but it was a 2x2 matrix, and it was things that you know about yourself, things that you don't know about yourself, and then the y-axis was things other people know about you, and things other people don't know about you. So, for example, something that you know about yourself and other people know about you is, it's something that you are very aware of, and the people around you know about it. Great. The stuff that you know that other people don't know, that's your private stuff, right? That might be feelings, that might be secrets, that might be stuff that you keep to yourself. But there's this interesting dimension of things that you don't know about yourself that others do know. And that I part with thought that quadrant I thought was really interesting. And so I was like, oh, maybe my community can offer me some insights about things I don't know about myself. Now, the thing is, you could tell me something. You could be really harsh about it. But remember, most of the harsh critiques that you're going to make, I already know. And that's what the joke is, that the tip is only to give me harsh critiques. You don't actually have to do that. I was just kind of joking about that. The other option was going to be $1,000 tip goal, and it was going to be starting the Shadowdeep art fund. Anyways, yes, I don't. My internet is currently poopy pants, and so I don't have enough bandwidth right now to stream on Twitch. More of the subtle hinting that I'm a sub. No, well, no, you know what? Actually, you know what, Simon, or Simeon, I don't know. How do you pronounce that? Sim. The thing, Sim, is that yeah, I apologize, William. I really am sorry. I started off by saying I was streaming to Twitch, and then my frame rate dropped through the ground. So maybe we'll in like 15 minutes, maybe I'll try to fire it up again. We'll see what happens. But what I was trying to say was that I think people in my situation have a disadvantage sometimes. And luckily, my community is really, really great. But I think sometimes when people in content creator spaces, not because they want to, but they end up surrounding themselves with a bunch of sycophantic people, and it's people start to think that everything that they do is the greatest thing ever, And so the joke is that I really appreciate it when it's not a joke; it's actually serious. I really appreciate when people give me that kind of critique, and they say, "No, that's a terrible idea." Because the last thing I want is somebody be I don't want to be surrounded by a bunch of yes men and yes women, right? Who just tell me everything I do is the best thing I've ever done. And then, somebody does critique me and a bunch of people, brigade that person and I don't want that. Anyways, Simeon. Okay, cool. Hey, what's up? Evan? Speaking of people getting stuff done, I don't know how this guy has time for anything. Here he is. The Johari window. Thank you, Lord Kyler, another Smarter Everyday fan. Yeah, Destin is great. Well, and the reason I said that, it's funny. I was thinking about that actually, Evan, when I was on your stream, and again, I'm very used to this. That I'm on the internet, but most people don't know who I am. And I was thinking about all these people in your chat or whatever who had no idea who I was, and they're like, "Who is this guy?" And I'm like, "Oh man, they're gonna think I'm the biggest asshole in the world," Because I'm just like, "No, that's not gonna work. No, that's not gonna work." But it is funny that Evan's here, because going on to his channel, and so he was watching me talk about Shadowdeep last Saturday, and then he got really inspired. So he's like, "Oh, I have a great idea of what I want to do for my dungeon." And so I came onto his show and we talked about it and kind of iterated through some ideas. And I was like, "Oh, that's a really cool idea. I really like that idea. But how do I do something else, and how do I do something different?" And that leads me to what I call the worst idea, the best worst idea I've had yet. So we can talk about that one. And we can just talk about my problem, my problem. I'll tell you this. Whatever bug that Evan has, which is like this pursuit, this ruthless pursuit of efficiency and clarity and high efficiency game design, I do not have that. Because whenever I have an idea, I'm like, no, that there is definitely an easier way to do this, and I am choosing the latter. I'm choosing something different. But I had this inspiration this morning. I'm trying. Maybe I'll walk through this idea of how we got to that. But that's the worst idea part of the thumbnail, where I said, "In the worst idea that I ever had." The logistics issue is actually something more. The logistics issue is actually something a little bit more generic than what you might be thinking about than a dungeon. Really, the logistics issue comes down to something that I think it was Garblag. I think it was Pete. Heroic Deeds. Heroic Deeds, Garblag Games, posted something in our Patreon that it was a link to a Reddit post. I clicked on it, and it was a Reddit post about Shadowdark from I think the Shadowdark subreddit, I believe. And it was a great conversation. I read through most of it, and so it was something I kind of wanted to talk about. And it was basically, and it's actually an interesting point because Evan's here. I don't know how long he's going to stay, but it was about form factor of Shadowdark books, and what does Shadowdark mean? And in the context and the logistics of my game, or I should say my dungeon or my adventure supplement, what is the form factor? What is the logistics of actually getting this thing done and getting it to people, really mean? Because I think we're at a point now where, let's say, not like literally tomorrow, but at some point, we are going to start to think about how we package all this together and then start filling in the details, right? The whole point of a bottom-up design is you design this sort of framework of the house, and then you start going in and decorating the rooms. But the shell, the form, the factor of the house is built first, right? As opposed to being like, I'm going to build the living room entirely on its own without having any idea what the bathroom's going to look like, where the kitchen's going to be. No, I don't want to do that. I want to lay in the foundation. I want to lay in the plumbing and the electrical. And then once everything's set up, then we can come in and we can make the living room cool, and we can make the dining room cool, and we can make the kitchen cool, and but we have an idea of where everything's going to be. And a big part of that, I think, comes down to the fact that this has to be a physical book. It has to be done into something. So that's something I want to be. Hey, we got a super chat. Oh, we also just got a tip.
$50. I'm not worried about getting spoiled about Shadowdeep from the streams, since it is likely going to be 2030 when it's finally crowdfunded. Zany face emoji.
Scotty, you're not wrong. One of the things that we talked about was like, how much should we spoil when we go through this? And it's something that's a big part of that. I think that's sort of where we have this problem of figuring things out. Like, if I'm walking you through my actual design, am I spoiling everything? And obviously most of the people watching this are probably GMs, but like, would a player come in and watch it? It's like, is it not as fun for you if you see what it would be, and all that other stuff? FL4G. So by bottom up design, I mean like I'm designing systems before I am designing a theme, right? So for me in game design, like I take a lot of my game design knowledge from Magic the Gathering. So in Magic the Gathering, top-down design, right, is, hey, I want to make a set about Greek mythology. Okay, so we're probably going to need gods, and we're probably going to need some sort of underworld, and we're probably going to need some sort of, whatever. So you're already thinking, oh, there definitely needs to be like a Trojan horse card, right, to fit the theme of Greek mythology and Greek myths. They did a set called Amonkhet, which was like, hey, let's do an Egyptian-styled thing. Okay, we probably need to have gods again. We need to have some sort of mummification type thing, right? That's got to be part of the whole thing. So that's like a top-down design. You're starting with like, themes and vibes and feels. And then for me, so bottom-up design is you go, let's build a set around a really interesting concept or card mechanic. There's no theme associated to it. We can make it whatever we want. It could be little bunny rabbits. It could be interdimensional space travel. But really, it's designed more around a mechanical framework than it is around a sort of thematic framework. And so when I talk about top-down versus bottom-up design, what I mean is I'm looking at it from a house perspective of like, what are the mechanics that we need for a house to work, right? We're going to need, well, how many people are going to be living here? Well, then we need 3 bedrooms, and we need at least 2.5 baths, and we need a kitchen. Okay, but the parents are planning on aging into this room, so we should try to keep like the laundry and the master bedroom all on the first floor, so that when the kids move out and if the parents age into the house, they can age in place. Like I'm thinking through all of these things, and then we'll worry about like, what do we have, hardwood or carpet? Do we have are we going for what are the window treatments, right? And I'm not saying that stuff doesn't matter, but that's what we're going for. Nimble, I completely agree with you. I think that most people are. I think a lot of people do go back and forth. Magic the Gathering design would tell you that they often go back and forth. It's hard to not go down one path and then get inspired to think about the future state of a situation. But I think it's more of like a fundamental, it's more of a guiding principle than like I refuse to think about themes, that's probably true. Most people here are probably GMs. Yeah, Embalm was great. Eternalize was cool. It was kind of a different variation of Eternalize of Embalm. Obviously, I grew up with blocks and I love blocks, but also I think that like those two block sets that came out there at the end kind of started to show where some of the weakness of the block format was. Because like Embalm and Eternalize were like different but the same, and like did they need to be? Not really, but. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. But Embalm was really cool because the idea was like you had these creatures who you kind of wanted to die because you wanted them to come back from the graveyard stronger in their embalmed format, right? Like they were better essentially as a mummy than they were when they were alive. So that was like a really cool thematic way of dealing with things. And then of course that thematically tied into Amonkhet, where to be embalmed and brought back as a mummy or whatever, to be eternalized, was considered at that time, they were misled by false religion. But they believed it was a great honor. In fact, they competed in these trials so that they would be killed and mummified. Like that was to be like a great honor. Which again, Magic the Gathering takes inspiration from all over the place. And I know that I remember when I went to Mexico, and they were talking about like the sports teams, in the Mesoamerican cultures would compete, and the winning team got sacrificed, to the gods, because that was considered the great honor. But thank you, Avison. Speaking of Magic the Gathering, thank you, Avison. Speaking of Magic design, flavor, top-down design, one of my favorite cards of all time is Avacyn the Redeemer and Avacyn the Purifier, right? The flip Avacyn, one of my favorite cards of all time. I mean, everything about that card is amazing. It is such a mechanical home run. It's fantastic. But yes, I appreciate you. I appreciate your support. It means a lot to me. All right. So, I don't know if I've told the story before. Again, you know. Pumpkin pointing out it's the captain of the winning team was sacrificed. There we go. Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Lobster roll tip $10, only because I've been told to deliver this harshly.
Correct.
When you crap on how other people enjoy games, you sound elitist. There's
Yes.
a ton of nuance here, but I'm trying to follow the prompt.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, no. This is good. I do try to make a point of not trying to, I'll even say things like, I'm not trying to yuck, I'm not trying to yuck your yum. But it is true. I do think people can have fun wrong. So I guess that is pretty elitist. You want to hear something else? I'll critique myself here. I know you guys are like, damn it, Derek, stop talking about stuff we want to talk about. Well, sorry, you came to the wrong stream. Go watch some 12-minute, carefully written Mystic Arts. It could be elitist and it could be a bit hipster. Well, no. You are correct, King Hodop. I think it's important to understand that those is like that there's a I could be trying to purposely offend you. And then whether you take offense or not to that is actually kind of really up to you and how you personally choose to receive things. So I'm not doing it maliciously. I understand I may be doing it, but I am not trying to do it maliciously. So there is something to be said about intent. For example, if I intend to kill someone and I kill them, I am guilty of murder. If I do not intend to kill someone and I do kill them, I am guilty of manslaughter. And we have different laws for that because intention does matter in the eyes of the law. Anyways. Now you could say I was being irresponsible. That's totally irresponsible, inconsiderate. All of these things could be true, but yes, menes rea, right? You have to have ill thought. I think is what that means, or something close to that. You have to ill intention. Man, my chat's disconnecting. This whole thing is just crazy, and my whole internet just reset. So I'm sure that was great. What is going on tonight with the internet? Yeah, no, I know. Something's going on here. Not great. Yeah, I mean, there's got to be something wrong going on with the internet somewhere. I don't know. I don't know if there's any bad stuff. I know it's supposed to like snow tonight, which is crazy. It was like 75 degrees yesterday. I'm just seeing if it's my computer. I'm checking my internet speed to my Wi-Fi router on my phone. Yeah, ISP definitely took the weekend off, Shadram. Yeah, no, it's just still my upload speed is just horrible. It's absolutely terrible. Well, all right. Not much I can do about that, unfortunately. And the ping is really bad, too. So, all right. Well, anyways, like, why is this thing all over the place? Well, that's why I checked on my phone, Simeon. I had to make sure that I had to make sure. All right. Anyways, yeah, I know YouTube is not receiving enough data. Man, brutal stream tonight. Well, maybe we won't be able to stream. I don't know. We'll try to get through it. All right. I apologize. Not great. All right, yeah, we seem to be a little bit stable back, but you know, I can't promise anything. So what I was trying to say was that I will admit that I'm a little bit hipster because, and again, it's no one's fault but my own, because you know we started this project in theory last year, and now here we are a year later, and suddenly there's this, you know, there's this mega dungeon month, and all these people are doing mega dungeons, and then Monty Cook is doing a mega dungeon for Numenera, and now MCDM is releasing Crows, right, which is this like super dungeon crawling game. And I'm kind of like, well, now everyone's doing a mega dungeon or a big dungeon game, and I'm like, now I don't want to. Because I'm like, well, if everybody else is doing it, I don't want people to be like, oh, he's just doing it because everybody else is doing it. And I'm like, no. So that's something that I've been, you know, yeah, I want to, you know, I did it before it was cool. I'm cooler than you are. But yeah. Also, let me see here. Oh, looks like my ninja got messed up too. So there we go. No, and that's actually, so, you know, I don't remember who said it. It was some investor, but they basically said, if no one is doing something, like no one's making an investment in something, like, or no one's doing something, you have to think twice about that. Like maybe it's a bad idea. It's crazy is that no one is doing it for Shadowdark, which is really, really crazy. Yeah, so that part is you probably never heard of it, and I liked X before it was cool. Well, to be clear, I don't necessarily know that mega dungeons are cool, but you know, I unfortunately, like, as someone who has oppositional defiance disorder, I respect this. Yeah, it's not even so much that, it's just like, yeah, I just don't know what, you know, what part of this I'm gonna do. Oh, I know what happened. It's because my YouTube reset. All right, hold on a second, I gotta. Because like my internet speed dropped so low that I literally lost my connection to YouTube. All right. Hopefully this works better. Yeah. Let's see here. All right. Somebody type something. Let's see here. Yeah. Okay, we're back. Did you consider having pathological demand avoidance? Yeah, so I have actually looked into that. And I kind of worked with that a little bit when I was seeing a therapist after my panic attacks, and she doesn't think so. The other one was like ADHD and like some elements of executive dysfunction, which is potentially something that's there, but the pathological demand avoidance. It's funny that you mentioned that because I was just having a conversation with that with a friend the other day about pathological demand avoidance, and there is some truth to that, even though my therapist didn't seem to think so. But yeah, I don't know. So Stan, you're not off base. I'll say that. Oh, I believe it. I believe it. We all do in some ways, it seems like nowadays. Okay, so anyways, logistics. We can talk about logistics first, and then we'll talk about my horrible bad idea. I'm irritated. Whenever the internet's bad, I'm just always irritated. So it's just very distracting for me, and then I'm trying to like lock in on what we're trying to say, and God knows I'm already scatterbrained when we do these things, so it's just kind of very double frustrating for me. So logistics. So let's. I mean, I guess we probably need to go to the whiteboard, but we don't have to go to the whiteboard, but we get to go to the whiteboard. I suppose is the way to look at that. Let me move my OBS window over here. But I don't want to rule out pathological demand avoidance. Not, I mean, for what it's worth, but I was actually looking at it. I was looking at it with I was looking at it like in ChatGPT the other day. Bend over backwards and go to the moon twice for you in a relationship, but I hate and I'll do it, but I hate when you expect me to or need me to. You know, it's like I don't know. It's really weird. But yeah, because the other thing too is I don't do. It's not like I do nothing. I mean, I'm very busy all day. I don't play video games. I don't watch movies. You know, I don't really. I don't doom scroll or anything like that. So I think part of the problem is that, for so long I was locked in. I had the girlfriend, I had the gym membership, I had the friend group, I had the job, the 9 to 5, and everything just, my life was, just on this kind of autopilot. Yeah. Apparently the stream might be cursed tonight. Yeah, unfortunately it might be. Sorry guys. I don't know what's going on. Yeah, it looks really choppy to me too. Level 2.
Level 2 janitor tipped $5.
Okay, here we go.
You asked for critique.
I did.
Love your streams, but I cringe when you go well chat says.
Oh, wait, what happened? Oh, okay, you cringe when you okay, you cringe when you say well ChatGPT says. All right, fair enough. I mean that is a totally reasonable take. I don't know. It's freezing for you guys as well too. Yeah, I mean, again, I think AI is I think it's a very interesting tool. I think it has a place and a use. I get that there's a lot of controversy surrounding it, and I'm not a big fan of that because, again, they literally fired me or laid me off so that they could replace my job with an AI. But, just another cog in the wheel of society, I guess. So unless we're going to start throwing our wooden shoes into machines, anytime soon, the march of progress moves forward, I guess. And like I said, when I was in high school, I learned how to develop film in my photography class. It was a very useful skill, right? And I'm sure once upon a time, every photo was taken on film, and you needed a developer and someone to develop it every single time. It is highly overused, absolutely, for sure. That's a generally good example of it. ChatGPT just answers what the general consensus on the internet is, and that's probably pretty much exactly the way it is right now. Yeah. People using this to make real decisions, I think that's kind of more scary, Stream entirely. Dang. Hello. I think we're definitely cursed tonight. I think amongst any sort of creative theft, I think the biggest problem with AI is that it is it is really not. I mean, it really hypes you up. It just tells you everything that you wanted to say. So if you're trying to use it to help to make decisions, that's in a bad spot to be. Because it's just going to tell you what you want to hear. Right now I'm being taken out by the robots. Ugh. All right, folks. Well, this is death. This is cursed. So here's what we're going to do. We will postpone this till tomorrow night. Because this is super cursed. So I could end the stream and start again, but that really wouldn't do it. That wouldn't do much of anything because it not only would it just reset everything, but I mean the problem is my internet is just not good. Like I am getting 0 bits off of my thing. So I mean, unless you guys want to continue to deal with this, but I'm certainly paying a lot of thanks, Dirty Phil. Appreciate the lurking text. All right, here's what we'll do real quick. Here's what we'll do really, really quick so that, my new internet is great, but tonight it is quite literally shit. It is worse than my old internet. Like I said, normally I get a gigabit down, which is 1,000 megabits, and I'm getting 10. So that means I'm getting 1%. Okay. So Monday morning I have to be the worst, have to watch out. Okay, no, we'll do it. We'll fuck it. Nope. Listen, you guys are stuck here. Whatever. We'll keep going. It's fine. Whatever. It'll suck. Fuck it. We'll do it live. Okay. Here we go. So let's start with the logistics. Okay. Let me get my whiteboard open. No, it's just frustrating for me because I'm such like a whatever, snob, like I'm such a quality snob. I hate the idea that like the internet is just like, shitting the bed, it's just that bothers me. And it just makes me want to keep looking at like frame rates and keep trying to change stuff and just doing all this other crap. And, I hate doing that. So that's where I'm doing what I'm doing. I will do one last thing, which is I'm going to absolutely tank the quality of this stream. And there we go. Yeah, Derek is frustrated because he's elitist. Okay, so the real question, as I've said this before, is from a logistics standpoint. One shot quest is coming to me. Okay, so here is my preference for how I would deal with this. The way that we originally laid out, in theory, this dungeon is, and this is kind of a big, this is sort of a big decision I need to make. The way we originally laid out this dungeon, I'm trying to find it here. Excuse me. Okay. Roughly speaking, this is how we laid out the dungeon. Now, from our initial viewpoint, there's sort of 3 things, and I originally talked about these things, actually kind of expecting this, but then I realized there was some pushback from people about this. So one of the things that I need to decide from a logistical standpoint is how do we publish this thing? And we kind of did an informal poll about this on Discord. And basically, one option, and I was pulling up all these mega dungeons because, one, if we do it as a series of volumes, okay, like 1, 2, and 3, it means that people can, quite frankly, get it sooner, right? Because if you have to wait, because I mean, when we were kind of kidding / not kidding about this dungeon, was we were going to do 500 plus encounter areas. Okay. And my initial idea, what I would like to do. Now this gets back to form factor, right? This gets back to logistics. This gets back to what Garblag Games was talking about with that link, posting to the Shadowdark forum where they were talking about like form factor. And there was somebody who said, there was a bunch of people, it's all anecdotal, right? But like there were a bunch of people saying, I ordered something from third party. I sent it back because it was 8.5 by 11, right? And basically, it was people saying like, if it's not digest size, right? If it doesn't look like my Shadowdark book, I don't want it. But then this gets to like, and I'm really all over the place here because I'm just jumping around from a bunch of ideas. But this gets to this idea of like, is this Shadowdark, and what does that even mean? Because like, is this really a Shadowdark dungeon? What does being a Shadowdark dungeon really mean? It doesn't really mean anything exactly. And so like, because I think there's going to be a question of like, does this get converted into 5e or tunnels and trolls or nimble, right? Like, like is there a world for that? So that's, I think, one of the first ideas is like, if this is though for Shadowdark, and to be clear, one of the reasons I would not be lying, I would not be telling you otherwise, is I think that this is a cool market, a good group of people who like dungeons. I'm not saying that 5e people won't buy dungeons, but I do think that Shadowdark people are more likely to buy a mega dungeon than 5e people. But if we think about a 500-page dungeon, my idea, let's say we had a digest size book, right? That's a little bit too wide for a digest size book. So this is the 2-page spread of a digest book, right? So my idea rooms onto one page, whereas a major room would be a major room would probably be a 2-page facing spread, right? And so that means if we're talking, I don't know what the percentage is of minor to major, and maybe there's even some rooms that are 4 pages, right? But I mean that means that a 500-page, if we have 500 encounters and we try to fit that into one book, especially but an index size or a digest size book, it's going to be a square, right? Because I mean, then what? This is going to be 700. I don't know, 700 pages, 800 pages. Like I just think that that's crazy, right? That's way too much. And so if I wanted it to be like, I don't know, like this size, I don't happen to have my Shadowdark book. It actually is not with me. This book here is 250 pages. So that means that we could probably fit in 150 150 encounters, maybe. And again, if we were thinking about maybe 150 to 200 encounters, and again, because there's going to be other things in the book, right? There's going to be some monsters, or there's going to be some other things, or whatever. And then we could fit maybe like we could fit like 3-ish levels into one of those books, and we could do it as a 3-volume set. You've hopped on for a few minutes before bed, Derek. What was about? So I'm only doing this because I love Shu. He's a valued member of my community. One of my guiding lights of Northern Reachdom. So I'm going to very quickly take a quick side tangent from talking about logistics to very quickly talk about this. I'm trying to find a really quick image that I could steal. No, that's not a good one. Okay, that one's not a good one either. I don't like that one either. I'm trying to find a good one. This gives the answer away. All right, I will use. Well, everyone knows what that is. Okay, here we go. I'm just going to copy paste this. It's going to look like a potato. Okay. Does anyone know what this is? I mean, I know you know what it is, but does anyone here know what it is? The cube is a great system. Hey, look at that. We got people all over the place. We got hex flowers. Okay. Sorry, hex flower, level 2 janitor, hex flower, zip zap rap says it's a hex flower. All right. So it's a hex flower. Okay. So what is a hex flower? Well, a hex flower is actually a Markov chain. So a Markov chain is just a way in which basically you tie procedural events, random events together, right? But here's my idea. So this is where we get into kind of what we were talking about before, and then for where I was inspired and how inspiration happened and how we got to this point. So here's basically my problem, or what I liked. So my idea is that, or what kind of happened is I was talking in my stream about how in some of my dungeon-based campaigns, most recently when I ran Dungeon Time Extreme, when I ran 5e, instead of using the traditional roll a d6, yeah. So now that the cat, that's what it is. Now that the cat is out of the bag, everybody knows it's weather. This is a common way that people will do things like weather. Okay. So what a hex flower is it's a random table that remembers. Okay. So it's a random table that remembers. So you can imagine that if you were here, okay, on well, that's not my. Let me lock this. Apparently, it wants me to just. Nope, can't lock it. It won't let me lock it. You're not gonna let me lock it. All right, there you go, you stupid, dumb piece of shit. Okay, so if you're here on a super sunny day, it really wouldn't make much sense that the next day would be a or like the next time you do weather that it's a rampaging thunderstorm. So the idea is that when it's a sunny day and you roll the weather, you roll 2d6, okay, and you might roll a 2 to a 3, in which case it becomes partly cloudy. And now that it's the clouds are moving in, okay, you might go to severe weather, or you might go to this. Now this is important because this is its own separate table, right? And basically saying this is almost a result within a result, right? It's a table within a table. But you could see that you might go from cloudy to stormy. Now that's not to say that you couldn't go from it could be a very bright sunny day and then suddenly boom you pop to a severe weather event, right? So that is a possibility that could occur, right? The area, the weather is very unstable. So if you've never seen these before, this is called a hex flower, and specifically this is a weather hex flower. Very common way of doing it. But another way to think of it is a random encounter table that remembers. Okay. And the thing that I was talking about, which I got inspired by, was actually sort of was what Evan was talking about when he was talking about, using the pools of d6s, and then you're adding d6s, and he had this idea that if you roll multiple ones, that you might get a more dangerous encounter. Now, that's great, and it's very simple and it's very nimble, and that's what's really great about it. But what immediately kind of like triggered me, but originally kind of got me like thinking was I was like, well, I like the idea that the frequency isn't necessarily tied to the deadliness. I like those things to kind of be separate components. But what I thought when he started going down that route, I thought about how we talked about tension. Right, we talked about tension and how we liked, one of the things that the reason why I used that pool, which was again, I originally took it from this game, the Marvel Heroic Room role playing, where it was called the Doom pool, as in like Doctor Doom, and you would build up this tension, and the idea is that as you get more and more dice, you're more likely to have some sort of big event. However, what I thought was cool from a tension building perspective is I love the idea of like something happening that triggers a result that sort of gives you a hint or a clue, right? That something is bad, right? Like that you're entering, we talked about like having an encounter with trolls, but like not actually hasn't begun yet, right? So I liked this idea of the random encounter table sort of shifting and sort of representing this. And so it made me think, and again, this is why I said is could we modify, or could we reflect a roll, or a random encounter table as being sort of a hex flower? And the way to think about a hex flower is, this is about as simple as it gets here, the one that we have over here. But the center, okay, is safe. The first ring, okay, would be signs and hints of danger. Okay, and then the outer ring would be the actual encounter with the creature itself, right? Does that make sense? So in other words, if let's just say 8 is a really nasty troll encounter, okay, then rolling a 2 might be, the signs of a troll. But what that means is that if you are on 2 and you see signs of a troll, okay, you're never going to be able to get an encounter with carrion crawlers. At least not by default, right? Again, it was just a half sort of, and again, originally, like I was thinking, like, oh, we'll work through this together. I just like literally had this idea this morning, but like what I wanted was, I wanted a random encounter table that could remember, Well, okay, so Simon, you are absolutely correct. So what we do is certain encounter areas will immediately, right? Because one of the ideas that you have to do for this is, or one of the conceits that you have to do when you do this is you need to you kind of have to have a marker, like a pawn, like the robber from Settlers of Catan, right? In theory, right? You have a marker that is on this board, right? You'd be moving the little pawn around here, right? Like you'd be moving it from here to here, and you put your pawn on this location, so now you know where you're at. Okay. Well, one of the things that we could do is when you enter a certain area of the dungeon, one of these encounter areas, okay, there might be something in here that says something along the lines of like, move the random encounter marker to 13, right? And so you've now entered an area, right? You've now entered the Minotaur area, and so immediately your marker goes to here, regardless of where it was, right? So it's not just changing in time, it's also changing in space. Oh, yeah. We'd have to do something clever in that respect. Now, the reason why I said that this is absolutely terrible about this, okay, is because I actually don't like this. Okay? I actually like this. And what is this? Okay, this is 3 rings. Okay? Right? So like in my perfect world, you would actually have one of these. Now, because it gives you more fidelity, but also realize, like, I'm thinking, okay, like legitimately here, I'm thinking that when you get your Shadowdeep box set, okay, you get a laminated, dry erasable, okay, you get a laminated dry erasable move. What's what I'm looking for? You get a laminated dry erasable the encounter flower, okay, for each level of the dungeon, right? It's like a cool little, like, yes, you could print it on paper and just use a piece of paper, but we're going to give you this dry erasable thing, right? That you could do, right? So that was kind of my idea. I see there's a bunch of questions in chat. A bunch of stuff. You'll make a nice wood one. Yes. Right. There's a full Settlers of Catan board. By the way, this is bigger than a Settlers of Catan. This is a 5 or 6 player Settlers of Catan board. Now, Nate says, isn't each random encounter having its own 3 clock just much simpler? Yes, but also no. The reason is because if the troll starts, like if we start the troll clock, now that means that every time we roll the random encounter, okay, that we are advancing the troll, okay, right? We're advancing the troll clock. But what if we move to an area? Because again, it's like if you remember when I was describing the way I did it in my tension pool, which was different. The way I did it with my tension pool is I would add various dice, different dice to the pool. And then when I would roll them, if I rolled ones, I would take the dice out of the pool. And the reason is because I want them to have a way, I want there to be a way for the tension to shrink. See, this is not a design consideration that Evan included when we were talking and he took this, right? Because when I was talking about my tension pool system, and again, totally respect what Evan decided to do, is he had this idea of like the tension goes up, goes up, goes up, goes up, and then you have an encounter, and then it goes down, and then you start back up from 0 again. Maybe it's like the gamestness of me in me, but like I like the idea that the players can sort of through play sort of reduce that tension, and they might not have to have an encounter. Okay, the core problem that we were that's so funny. My Microsoft whiteboard itself is having sync issues because my internet is so bad. So my Microsoft whiteboard keeps yelling at me and saying I'm not syncing here. Anyways, I don't want to keep track of all this other stuff. Correct. And so what you end up getting is this sort of overlap, Chris, right? Where you have this sort of like, you might have, I don't know, trolls fighting carrion crawlers or something like that, right? Like you get these kind of overlay areas. Now we talked about GME and we talked about chaos factor. Again, this is a completely different idea of here is like of what we could do. But there's other factors at case in case as well, which is there's this idea, right, of like moving out, right, versus moving in, right? So like when the party does something that is more dangerous, right, you can move them out towards the danger, right? And if the party is doing something safer or doing something conservative, you might move them in, right? And you might move them closer into the danger. So anyways, I just like this. I don't know. This was like the idea I had, but like this concept of using, something, right? To sort of remember where you are on the encounter table, and also have the ability for certain rooms or certain areas of the dungeon to immediately move you and your encounter pawn, if you will, to a new area of the map, right? Like you didn't realize it, but you just walked into the lion's den, right? Like you were safe here, and then you walked into this area, Right, I could sell them along with the GM screen. There you go. How would you handle situations where your rolls cause you to just move around the signs of X-Ring and never go to an actual encounter at night to last call? The answer is dangers are present and how they're present and what they're doing and how they're how the dungeon is changing. I think that's actually really cool. Right. It's hex crawls and within hex crawls. So it's okay, Avison. Who the hell knows what's going on? I'm super delayed over here. My streams keep crashing. It's just a crazy night. The other thing is most of my dungeon levels. Okay, we talked about like level 1 being. You can see this is like relatively. This is supposed to be like a side view, but it's like a relative version of its number of rooms. You can see it's like 30 to 35 rooms. This is on the smaller size, right? So most levels are going to have somewhere between, 40 to 60 rooms. So having this many spaces on the hex map, almost it's not quite a 1-to-1, but it gives me a lot of basically it gives me a lot of addresses for the go-to function. Okay, and it's sort of a way of sort of simulationistly, but also gamistly, sort of reflecting the reality and the tension. It also gives us tools that we can use as a GM for how the party either gets into more danger, which is moving outward on the ring, and then moving inward towards safety, right? So that's kind of, you know, my generic idea. But that was for Shu, because he can only stay for a few things. Okay. Back to what we were saying before. Now I did see something, and again my internet's all fucked up, and I appreciate this. Let's see here. Evan had said something about why 500 rooms. And yeah, the answer is because we have 11 levels at roughly, you know, 40 to 60 rooms per level. So 50 rooms, let's call it 50 rooms times 11 levels, roughly 500 plus, you know, level, 500 plus encounter areas. By the way, 500 plus rooms, like it's more of like a room might be something like, you know, like this might be like, just so we're clear here. Like that might be a room, right? Like I'm like this might just be like, I don't, you know, this could just be like the Orc Temple. I'm not that. This isn't 3 rooms. This is one encounter region, you know, for lack of a better word. You know, yeah, a room is really more of a node. I mean, if we're using completely gamist language, Pumpkin is correct. It's a node. So yeah, this, you know, this I would call this one area, right? One room. And so when you talk about like you're using up a whole page for this, this might be a 2-pager, but you know, it sounds Orc Temple, it sounds impressive. But yeah, I you know, Shadowdark has a very sparse layout. And I appreciate that. I like that a lot. And I would like to include things like a map in the book, like a zoomed in version of the map of every encounter area or every regional area. There might be art, there might be, you know, spot art, there might be other things. So I would rather, and I would love to have a sort of default template that looks the same on every page, so that when you want to look, you know, when you want to look and open it up and go, okay, you know, what do the players see? What do the players hear? What do the players like? I don't know. You know, all the information that you would need very quickly and very relevantly. I want it to be like in the same place on every single page with every single layout. I don't know if I have a. I don't know if I have one of these on my shelves, because I might have put it. I might have put it in my. I might put it in storage. Let me see if I have the 4th edition Expedition series. I don't know if they. This is how badly I don't know 5th edition D&D. They might still do this. I don't know if they still do this, but they did this in 4th edition. But they also did this in 3rd edition. Hold on a sec. I'm looking for it. Okay. Nope, that's not it. Shit. No, I don't have it. No, I don't have that either. Okay, maybe we can use this. Nope. Nope, this isn't it either. Shit. Well, I mean, number one, certainly I love being able to do this like Dolmenwood did, but there was this formatting, and I just don't have any on this computer, but which is the Expedition Adventure series from 3rd edition used this encounter room template, and it was. I mean, this is going to be very rough, because this isn't exactly what I was talking about, but like, so this is an encounter area Now, it's obviously for 4th edition, so it's very, mechanical. But you can see here, it's basically, it has the setup, and then it has, like, we'll call it box tax. Then it has the tactics for the monsters, and then right here it's like the features of the areas, and it like describes the ceiling, the well, the pool, the broken fountain, and then it has all the monster stat blocks, right? So this, and you can see that the encounter area is sort of one main room with like this side room, but all the monsters here, all this other stuff, and yada yada yada, right? Like so, this is very usable to me. It's very actionable to me. It's very whatever to me. The other thing to remember is my Mega Dungeon design ethos is not simulationist. It is gamist. And that means that every node on our map is not a room. It is an area for the players to engage with it. If the players don't need anything to engage with it, it's not even going to be a room. In other words, right, that's the whole, there is no empty room. There is no, in fact, there wouldn't be a reason for there to be something that's short. Because the whole point of these nodes is that they are designed to be a unit of play. And so, do we have this here? No, level 1, maybe? We have so many. How do we zoom? Is this already zoomed out? Oh my god, this is zoomed out. Holy shit. Dungeon, just a breakdown. We have so many. We have so many levels. Oh, here we go. Okay, I found it. Okay, so go back to PDF browser. Right. So this was the node layout of level 1, right? And so while ultimately, this node area connects to this node area, these node areas aren't actually like one room, right? Like this easy creature encounter could be a series of rooms. I don't really think of it though in terms of rooms. I think about it in terms of, yes, there could be empty rooms. There would not be empty nodes. That's a great way to think about it. Correct. And when we use the term empty, I want to be very clear about something. This node here, okay, this lore node might not have any creatures in it, right? This lore node could be an ancient library. It could be a bunch of bas-reliefs. It could be an ancient sacrificial room with graven images carved into the pillars. And there's information that the players can get about other encounters, the lore of the dungeon, the history. Now, there might not be what I would call you might not have a monster here. But that doesn't make it empty. And empty, again, most of you probably only know more modern game design, and you're buying dungeons that are, extremely short. So there's not really room for this. But like if I pull out one of these older, more traditional dungeons, you'll see stuff like here, from this book here. Room 2, guard room. This chamber was once a guard room. Now it is filled with dust and cobwebs. There are some shattered remains of wood, but otherwise the room is empty. Right? That's that room. That's what you bought that with your money, like when you go to room 2 in this dungeon, that's what you see. Specifically in this case. Yeah, for the new people, my internet is terrible. I was going to cancel the stream, but the pill up, basically. I have no idea why. I'm going to have to call AT&T and bitch. So I was going to cancel it, but so anyways. So yeah, that's like room 2 is empty. Okay, well, let's go a little bit further. Pantry. This small chamber once held dried foodstuff, but is now empty. Alcove. This small alcove has nothing in. There's just all these areas here that are just terribly, terribly, terribly boring. Now, Ray Tales, busting out old school. You want to talk about something that is just like horrifying. You think what I'm creating, look, I am nothing. I am a shadow of a man. Okay? You think you're Phil, they're just empty. It's just an X. This is level 1, by the way, of Undermount. So yes, I mean, I have by the way, that's the yawning portal right there. That's where you enter. But you know, like but you know, like I mean, that's just level 1. This is for the first 3 levels of the book. Look how thin this is. This is all the keyed areas for the first 3 levels of Undermount. Is this level 2? Yeah, this is level 2. This is level 2. And before you think that's bad, these things are so old. This is level 3 north. Level 3 takes up 2 of these motherfuckers. This is level 3 south here in my hand. So all of that dungeon, which is 3 levels, by the way, of the first box set, is explained in this many pages. So the vast majority of that is completely and 100% empty. It's a lot of random encounters. There's a lot of stuff going on here. Also, randomly, we've got an old Dungeon magazine cover in here. Looks like a Tony D piece of art from September '95, Dungeon issue number 55. I recognize Tony D's work pretty much anywhere. On the back, we have an advertisement for D&D, GM options, high-level campaigns. So, is Undermountain Ed Greenwood's take on Castle Greyhawk? Yes, it is. Is Dungeon of the Mad Mage also Undermount? It should be. I mean, the Undermountain is known as the Dungeon of the Mad Mage because Hallister, the Mad Mage, created it underneath Waterdeep. So I don't know anything about the 5e version of the monsters, but yes. Now, what's crazy, too, here is this box set was just the first box set. I think they did 2 or 3 of these box sets. So, anyways, point is, a lot of empty rooms in here. And then this book is from like 2012 or something like that, and it's got a bunch of rooms that are empty too. And this is from 2012, yeah. So, anyways, while we may have quote unquote empty rooms, I am not using empty. My nodes, okay, will not be quote unquote empty. In that respect, right? Because I want every area to be an encounter play area. You know. No, Simon. You are 100% correct. Simon is correct in every way, which is, empty rooms, confusing mapping, right, was all designed to test players' skill, right? In fact, it was designed to waste their time so that they would spend time wasting their time looking for treasure or whatever in a room that it wasn't in, which gave you more time to trigger random encounters, which gave you more time to eat up the party's resources and kill them and make that more of a challenge, right? It was very much tied into this challenge-based mindset. But as I was talking with Evan, right, like I am not necessarily 100% on board with that idea of the game, where like it's the same thing with random encounters. The old school way of rolling a random encounters is every 2 turns, which is every 20 minutes, you roll a d6. On a roll of a 1, you get a random encounter. My problem with that is that you sometimes can go an entire session or 2 and never get a random encounter. I don't like that. But you could also go from a random encounter straight into a random encounter, straight into a random encounter. I don't like that either. Yes, that could happen. Yes, that might be realistic. but I don't necessarily want that from a gameplay pattern perspective. And I'm not going to act like a dungeon makes any sort of real sense anyways. So I'm fine applying some sort of, gamist methodology to that prospect. In the old days, you rolled for a random monster every 2 turns, officially. I mean, that was the official rule. And I agree. It is the kind of stuff that makes modern players hate dungeons, and they're rightfully so, because a lot of dungeons are designed, I think, rather poorly. I think a lot of people just sit down and they just start drawing stuff on graph paper, and then they fill it in later. And, I don't necessarily know that creates the best dungeon experience that we could have. Now, the other thing, too, to remember about this nodal layout structure is this is for level 1, which is our easiest level. It's our smallest level, right? This is the training wheel level. And, we sort of had all these connections, and we had these different regions and different areas. But any case, what were we doing here? So to go back to what we were discussing earlier, my thought process was perhaps we could do multiple volumes. Now, there's another reason that I kind of liked the idea of doing multiple. Now, none of this is probably good from a business perspective, because as somebody pointed out, they said, well, what if somebody just buys the first one and never buy the last one? You don't get them for as much money, right? Oops. Okay. The other reason, and this is another thing that I'm very cognizant of, and I actually want to provide, okay, which is I understand and realize that most people, okay, aren't going to play an entire mega dungeon, nor should they ever be expected to. And I understand that there's a certain level of, there's a certain level of like, I want to beat it itis that happens when you play a game. But there's also a certain level of like expectation that you're going to get some sort of satisfying ending, And so while there isn't a overarching story, okay, that we've talked about, and that's part of the point of a mega dungeon, right? There's no, you have to do this, 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 you have to do this. I still think it is a good design, and this is me, again, applying a more, meeting people where they're at, rather than where they are. Now, one of the things that we talked about, again, spoiler alert, but in fact, I talked to Kelsey Dion about this at GaryCon, and I basically said, is this okay? And I said, is this cool? And she said, yes. She said, that's kind of why we did it. So in the Shadowdark book, 2 of the gods are not described. They are called the Lost. And no one knows what happened to them, where they are, where they might have run off to. And so the idea of my mega dungeon is that one of these lost gods, okay, is bound and trapped or imprisoned or, otherwise detained, sleeping, chained, pick your poison, at the bottom of this dungeon, okay? So, and it's kind of like the reason d'etre of this whole dungeon, right? Is that fundamentally, at some level, at the bottom of it is now to be clear, you don't have to go through this dungeon and fight the god and kill it, because it's not necessarily like an existential threat. Now, as a GM, there might be a way for you and your players, if you want to turn the dial up. My full inspiration from Conan the Destroyer, I'll be completely admitting on that, where if you've seen Conan the Destroyer, then you know that the people of Shadowzar believe that the dreaming god Dagoth needs to be reawakened with the horn on his head, and he will usher in a 1,000 years of peace and prosperity for their people. And of course, he's not. He's an asshole. And so, you might have a faction who is trying to awaken the sleeping god, right? Because they believe that it's a god of peace and who will punish the wicked from the earth. And of course, the wicked are whoever opposed them, naturally. And better to serve at the devil's right hand, right, than to be crushed before him. That who knows, right? There's a lot of different ways we could go with that. But anyways, point is, there's a very satisfying. I'm not going to lie. There's a very satisfying component to any real D&D game to get to the bottom of the dungeon and kill the big bad. Now, that doesn't mean that, again, we have to make it like an adventure path where the big bad is like, 100%. Of course, the big bad's going to get break free, and if the players don't do it, no one will. Like, maybe that's not something that happens. Like, if the players, I don't know, kill all the faction people or convert them, like, maybe this will never be a threat. Maybe the players go and wake the god up because they're like, we must deal with this threat. Classic player logic thing. Anyways, that's great. That's fun. That's cool. The players don't have to do that. In fact, depending on what path and route the players go through, number one, more than likely, they will never get to the lost god. But another thing is, like, to take a step back, okay? How many people do you think played Rise of the Rune Lords and never destroyed or got to or killed, right? I'm having a brain fart. The Rune Lord of Greed. Oh my God. Can't believe I have to look this up. Karzug. All right. How many people think you actually got to Karzug and beat Karzug and killed Karzug? Like, nobody. I mean, like, a very small percentage of people. So one of the things that I like the idea of is designing the dungeon in such a way that it's more approachable for people who maybe aren't going to play all 11 levels of the dungeon. And so one of the ideas that I have from a logistics and a form perspective is, and this is subject to change, but like, if we look here, we've got level 1, 2, 3, and 4. So like, maybe, right? Maybe this is volume 1. Okay. And then, like, this is volume 2. And again, I'm just spitballing this here completely. Right. And then this is volume 3 or something like that. Right. And what we can do is volume 1 can sort of have, for lack of a better word, a mini boss. And so if you never ever play volume, you never get to level 5 of the dungeon, the campaign petered out, people played Shadow, you played for months, you guys got to level 4, level 5 in your Shadowdark game, but then you got to level 4 and, you killed the high priest of rot, right? And because you guys have been fighting against the rotting tendril faction, you've been fighting against the rotting tendrils since the beginning of the campaign, and then when you get to roll for combat, 100%. You say it all. I say it. You say it. I learned it. If anything, I learned it from you, which is video game design is like 10 years ahead of board game design, which is like 10 years ahead of role-playing game design. That's actually the well. I don't think takes you to level 11. Actually, I think it only takes you to like level 3 or 4. Actually, but it's like a sub level. It's got like this ghost vampire wraith thing. But you're completely correct. Roll for combat. And what I'm trying to say is that if you buy my Mega Dungeon and you play through Volume 1 and you guys crush level 1 and then you go down to level 2 and you beat on that for a little bit and then you hop down to level 3 and then you go back up and then you go to level 4 and then you beat the High Priest of Rot and you take out that faction that you've been dealing with, that's a very satisfying conclusion. That's a very like, okay, we never played the rest of the dungeon, but that's okay, because for me, the dungeon, we didn't, maybe you guys never even learned about the Lost God, and you didn't really, quite frankly, care. Your experience with the dungeon was based off of interactions that you had with this faction, right? And I don't know, I can't remember what term I used them, right? Like the rooting decay or the something, you know, some sort of, I don't know, twisted druid, we'll say, some sort of evil druid faction, right? And they kind of became your group's kind of big bad. You took them out. There was like a cool, satisfying boss, and they died. And everybody, you know, got to level 4 or 5, and everyone, you know what we said? Good job, everybody. Cool campaign. But that was satisfying. It gave us an ending. I mean, how many campaigns have you guys played that just never got an ending? You know, like you were playing through an adventure path, and then one day you stopped. And you know that adventure, like you know that, you know, the princess was in another castle, and you know that all of the bad guys were just breadcrumbs on the way to, you know, a different bad guy, or any of those other situations. So I want to be able to kind of create this experience that allows you to pick up one volume and beat that boss, that sub boss, and be like, that was a very satisfying thing. And I'm okay with that. Now, yes, I would love for, you know, I would have hoped that the GM and the group would aspire to play through the whole dungeon. But the fact of the truth of the matter is, very few, if any, groups ever will. I own a lot of these mega dungeons, and my groups have never played through all of them. Okay? In fact, I'm going to be completely honest with you. You know what we do when we usually play a mega dungeon? I've run Rapanathuk a number of times. I don't even know where the fuck it is right now. It's behind me somewhere. I've run Rapanathuk a number of times. You know what we usually do? We play it for a while. We enjoy it. Even though we've run it before, we typically take a different route, or we encounter different things. Sometimes it's because we go a different way. Sometimes it's because of random encounters, you know, that generate different results. Okay? We had a bunch of run-ins with this group of monsters instead of that group of monsters. So we kind of developed different frictional interfaces with different groups. And we usually end up getting to a point in the system or the game where we go, oh, cool. We found that, you know, we found the lair of the trolls. Let's wipe them out, you know? And then the GM's like, okay, guys, sounds good. Let's prep for the big final battle against the trolls. And, you know, we'll call that a day. Don't worry, guys. Maybe we'll come back someday. You know, you always get like the one player, the two players who are like, no, I love my character. And you're like, no. We're not saying the campaign's over. We're just saying, you know, let's try something else. I really want to play the One Ring. But it's putting a bow, you know, it's putting a bow on it. So rather than designing, an entire holistic, dungeon that is monolithic and is to be beaten, my thought process, and again, this is a bit more gamey than I would otherwise have, is to have. Can I click this? What is this? Okay, is to have 3 tiers of factions. Okay, so there's going to be major factions, and major factions will basically run the entire gamut of the dungeon. You will theoretically encounter them. Now remember, the dungeon, there's a couple of truisms about dungeon design. Difficulty goes up as you go down. Magic, supernatural, whatever, goes up as you go down. Weirdness, strangeness goes up as you go down. And in the case of Shadowdeep, tying into the idea of Shadowdark, things get darker and more evil, right, as you go down. So you may encounter a major faction all the way up on level 1, but it really doesn't reach its final form, until you get deeper into the dungeon. But this is theoretically something that you would be experiencing it. Now, you might only be, encountering bits and pieces of it early on, but eventually it is a force, essentially one of the major forces of the dungeon. And then there's this idea of minor factions. Minor factions are going to basically represent one, maybe 2 levels. These are the factions that, for lack of a better word, are beatable. the players reasonably will have a chance of encountering them, engaging with them, and to a certain extent, meaningfully dealing with them if they wish to. Now, their power and their scope are going to be somewhat limited depending on where they are in the dungeon. Okay, so as an example, level 1, which we know, is near the surface, has multiple exits and entrances and surfaces. One of the factions on level 1, right, could be like, the bloody blade gang, right? And it's a gang of outlaws who hide out in the dungeon to escape justice. They prey on adventurers. They use it as a hideout, and they're there to do something else, unbeknownst maybe to the Bloody Blade, maybe their leader is secretly become cursed by an evil knife. Very, Matt from Eye of the World style, right? Like he found some map, and that dagger or that blade that he picked up is actually a cool lore clue, right? That ties us into something deeper in the dungeon. But anyways, that's how we do that. It's a very discrete faction. It has ties to the surface. It's fairly mundane. It's not super evil. I mean, it's evil, but it's not like undead lich evil. It's just bandits, but it's beatable. It's dealable. Now, are you going to be dealing with this faction when you're on level 4 or level 5 or level 3? No, it's pretty much restricted to level 1, maybe on level 2. So that's a minor faction, and then I don't have a term for it, so I'm just going to call them standard factions. My idea of a standard faction would be for the standard faction to live within a single volume of the book. In other words, one of those tiers. Okay, so, we said that the High Priest of Rot that you beat on level 4 is a very satisfying conclusion, right? So, we'll say that the evil twisted druid faction is maybe a standard faction, and you're going to see them on level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, but not so much the lower levels of play. And this, if that's the route that your sandbox game goes, might be a route that your group takes to being a satisfying arc. So what am I saying here? Is basically this gives you the ability to create 1-level arcs, multi-level arcs, or entire campaign arcs. Now, there's no preset structure for this. It comes down to what do your players engage with, maybe what do the random encounters come up with, and the random reaction rolls, or any of that other stuff. So in a way, this gives you the ability, if you wanted to, you could just play this as a 1-level dungeon, right? You could buy volume 1. I'm sorry, I'm not selling it to you as an individual level. Maybe I could, I guess. But you buy level 1, and the party goes into the dungeons, and starts fighting the Bloody Blade bandits. Okay, and you play for a couple weeks, couple sessions, and you beat them, and you kill the leader of the Bloody Blade bandits, and that's the end of the game, right? And that's it. That's what you chose to do with the story, with the adventure, and then that was it. You never went any further. And that might be satisfying enough for some people. They close the book, they put it on the shelf. That's sort of the not the one shot, but like the multi-shot perspective, Well, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that Dungeon Crawler Call does this. Number 1 of the game is called Dungeon Crawler. So that's that. And number 2, I'm assuming that the person who wrote this book is aware of D&D. And they did, whatever, they mega dungeons are kind of endemic to D&D. Castle Greyhawk was a mega dungeon with the original mega dungeon. And so the logistics of this is such that it kind of introduces a degree of modularity. I don't know if it's quite that modular, Simon. I would say maybe. I don't know if that's a design goal. But what I am trying to say is that you could have a group who plays through this dungeon and they never even deal with the evil twisted druids. You don't have to deal with the evil twisted druids. They're not important in that sense. And that's like the important part. If the players never encounter them, or the players quickly make short work of them, or the players, I don't know, maybe make a truce with them or whatever, or maybe they just never come up. Maybe the party just happens to go in a different direction where the faction that they mostly are dealing with is the, I can't remember what we called them. I think this is from like literally a year ago, but I think we called them the Pale Court. I think that probably more of a tier 2, but like the Pale Court was this idea of there was like this group of vampires, or something. Like there was like a coven of vampires. It was very like I think at the time we were all like nerd loving over like Underworld or something like that, and we all thought that was really cool. Pumpkin confirming, by the way, that it was the Pale Court. So respect to both of us, Pumpkin, for remembering that. But your group may have dealt with the Pale Court, and you guys may have had a lot more focus on undead and the machinations of the Pale Court and some of that other stuff, you know? So that could be your group's progression, you know? And I don't know that these have to be like completely, you know, tied in. Again, it's ultimately it's a toolbox, right? It's for the players and for the GM to create these sort of experiences. But yeah, so that was kind of what I was thinking about from a logistical perspective. Because I've heard a lot of people say too, like zines and all this other stuff, which is cool. Because like, you know, in full transparency, what would be neat is because then, like I said too, there's also like there's also the printing logistics of it, right? Like if I only have to design, you know, the first couple of levels, and then, you know, we can try to, you know, print that and get people to buy it. You know, that's a lot cooler than have people maybe having to wait, I don't know, 2 years, you know, to get the third volume. And I get that people are like, yeah, but what if the party, you know, wants to go down to level 7 and you don't have volume 2 out? And I would say, I mean, the same thing is going to happen that would happen in real life, which is you'd have to wait a year, because if you have to wait for level 7 for the adventure to come out, I'm going to have to wait. You're going to have to wait another year to even start the campaign, is what I'm going to say here, you know? You could also just build level 7 yourself, or that's what I was saying before. You could just use the dungeon as a template to do one. You could do an entire campaign down to level 4, have your cool satisfaction, end it. Then volume 2 comes out, maybe, you know, 8 months later, 10 months later, a year later, and you guys go, hey, you guys want to do another Shadowdeep campaign? It'll be completely different, and this time we now have up to level 7, so we can go even deeper into the dungeon if we want to, you know? I mean, you can do some other tricks, you know, like if you played Abomination Vault, they do this in Abomination Vault. I think it's behind me somewhere. In Abomination Vault, they like at the end of the first module, there's like this mysterious force field that is blocking the stairs down to level 5, because it's a way for like it's a way for the GM to basically like, you can't go that way yet. I don't have that module. But you guys still need to go beat the boss. Yes, right. The same thing as the mist. Exactly, Ray. Exactly. Yes, it's very heavy-handed, but you know, you could do something like that. So from a logistical standpoint, you know, what I think would be really cool would be, you know, to like get level 1, you know, and maybe like level 1 or 2 basically made, more or less. I mean, ideally in a perfect level, you know, levels 1, 2, 3, and 4 or something like that. And maybe even kind of reverse it a little bit, because now that I'm thinking about it, like maybe it makes more sense that like the first volume is levels 1 through 3, and then 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8, 9, 10, 11. So it's 3, 4, 4, 4. No bug. That's also not a bad idea. You know, you could kind of reroute some stuff, you know, to give you guys some extra options. I actually kind of like that, you know. So this would be, you know, volume 1, this would be volume 2, and this would be volume 3. So like as a you know, because again, look, you guys know me, right? I'm not speedy. I'm not quick. I'm no Mark Seifter. I'm no Evan Diaz. So, but I also like the idea. I love the idea of being like, hey, we're going to do volume 1 of this mega dungeon. We have the entire framework already designed. You can read that, you can know that, you know, a lot of the larger scale details will already be sketched out. Level 1 is going to cover levels 1, 2, levels 1, 2A, 2B, and level 3. It's going to be approximately 150 plus rooms in encounter areas, nodes, or whatever you want to call them, not just rooms, but like encounter areas. It's going to feature X, Y, and Z, like it's going to feature 10 minor factions, the four standard factions, along with the introduction to the 3 overarching major factions that cover the entire dungeon or whatever like that. And some monsters and whatever, some rules and procedures to do this. And then I could design. Ideally, I would design all of them, but at the very least, I could get level 1 design, level 2A design. We do the Kickstarter. The digital files are essentially available immediately. People can start playing with it, ideally immediately, and then we can use that time to sort of fix and finish things like art and layout issues and maybe typos and stuff like that before we go to a print, and then just do 1 volume. I think that that's going to be easier logistic. I don't know, like from an end user perspective, does it make more sense? Because like to do more of like a, you get volume 1, then you get, you get to level 1 and a zine, and then you get level 2A as a zine, and level 2B as a zine, and level 3 as a zine. Derek, personally would find that a little annoying. That's just me. And then maybe someday, once all 3 volumes are released, there is a world where we do some sort of, massive, the cube, right? The massive, the omnibus edition, right? Where it's this, massive thing in full print paperback. Because as I was saying before, about Rapanathuk, Rapanathuk came originally when I bought Rapanathuk. It came as 3. It came as 3 modules, right? It came as R1, R2, and R3. And then they eventually, they added some nice bits and boops and bops, and they expanded it, and they made this nice box set with, some extra premium stuff, and then it was like all, in one. But originally it was released as, and I think this is like it's like a 20 level dungeon or something like that. I don't even know how far deep this goes. But again, they had literally the upper levels, the middle levels, and the lower levels, right? Culminating with, of course, the fight against Orcus. R1, R2, R3. Absolutely. I mean, I think we would try to design the volume so that you could just buy it and use it. But ultimately, I would think that you would try to you could try to show how things have changed, and you could maybe advance certain elements of like the how things change. But again, I'm also assuming that somebody might have the entire thing. I mean, the whole idea is to create a framework that you can use to kind of create your expressive style. So I think that that's from a logistical standpoint. I really like that process, because what it allows me to do also is actually, try to publish something sooner than later, because if I'm trying to do 11 plus levels over 500 plus encounter node areas, I mean, that's just going to take, ridiculous long period of time. So now that's a whole separate thing. If you want to talk about, like, I don't necessarily know if it's a zine thing. But I did talk about the idea that I like the idea of having, like, the read only layout version, and then the at the table version, now that's not feasible really at all. Apparently everybody who's ever done design has told me that that's completely an idiot. And that's another great, even if the project gets abandoned or never finishes, at least at least what you get could be usable, rather than like having to wait for the whole project. But it's also very clear to me, like, if I sell, and I'm trying to be very honest with you here, I'm trying to avoid problems. Okay. If I sell you, there's 2 options. If I sell you a 500 plus encounter area dungeon that's 11 levels, you're either going to have to wait 2 or more years for it, which is 3 more years, which is fine. But that also means that I might never get done. But it also means that if I do kickstart it and you do back it, now every time I delay anything for any reason whatsoever, I'm going to feel bad. And it's going to weigh on my conscience. It's going to, I'm not saying that I would ever like fail to deliver, but people are probably going to get very frustrated with me. And I just as soon avoid that. And that's just me being real and realistic about what I know my mentality is and my, the way that I'm doing stuff. So I think that's the other thing. Now, Zen Bullet says Dolmenwood switched away from zines for a reason. I love the way that Dolmenwood is set up. I think it's a beautiful book. I love that they have that player's book, which I think is great. I love the campaign book, but it's not just Dolmenwood, right? I love the way. Where the hell are you at, Evan? I was like, all my stuff's been getting taken off of my. All my stuff's been getting taken off. Here it is. I love the way that, that Evan did Nimble. And I love his box set. And I love that he has, the core rules as a separate book. The Game Master's Guide is its own book. It's this nice, it's easy to carry. It's easy to carry, whatever. I mean, I think that's great, So I think it's really cool. Yeah. Return to Shadowdeep, the queue, right? It's just this massive, it's a book. It's like a digest sized book that's like literally this thick, you're just like, yes, Simon, you're not wrong. I mean, it's not the kind of pressure I would ideally like to have. I like being able to take my time and, and get things done, properly and appropriately. Quite frankly, Simon, the bigger problem I'm going to have is my desire to do stuff like this. And just, having the, and here's the key. You know what the key is? You just go optional. And then you give 2 pages over to just a plain old boring random encounter table, Yeah, I mean, that's not a bad idea, Panic. Like, we could have like different supplements and stuff like that kind of expand the ideas and have additional things. And a great example of zines could also be like, so for those of you, again, we were talking about the box set about the Ruins of Undermountain, the AD&D second edition box set. They actually published a series of modules for this called The Lost Levels. And believe it or not, in that dungeon, which is already absolutely ridiculous, they introduced this idea of basically bonus levels. So you could imagine, if you will, I'm going to just grab this. Okay. That was going to be bad. I know how to pan. You don't have to remind me how to do it every time like I'm a fucking moron. Why are you doing that? No. Why do you do that? Like, who wrote your software? And what is wrong with you? It's crazy. Anyways, but basically, like, you could do like a zine where you introduce level 4A, which is it's a lost level, it's just like a bonus level that you add into the dungeon, right? These were traditionally called sub-levels in dungeon design. In fact, if you remember when we talked about the nodal structure of dungeons, right? We talked about you have like a link, and then you have a fork, and then you have, and I don't remember what we called that one, but you have a intersection, a cross section, and then you also have a terminating node. And we talked about like the value of each of these, and that and generally speaking, hub, that was the word we used, yeah. So hub orc link and you could think of the dungeon levels, right? One of my goals with the dungeon level, and I talked about how you need to be very careful about using links because they can be very linear, because that's quite literally what they are. And when I'm designing the dungeon levels, right, I'm trying to mostly create nodes that are forks and hubs. And I try not to make my hubs I try not to make them bigger than this. I mean, when you start having like 4 or 5 or 6 different things coming off of, choices off of a hub, it can become a little bit overwhelming and almost too much. So my dungeon level design is it's an inception, right, of dungeon design. Not only as the level and the nodes in the level designed this way, but the dungeon itself is designed this way, right? Like level 2 goes to level 3A with 2 entrances and it has 1 exit, right? But there's also an exit down to level 7, so it's a hub. You have basically 4 lines going in and out of level 3A. And the traditional dungeon design most people would have is like a link, right? That's the bad dungeon design, right? The non-jaquazed level 1 goes to 2, goes to 3, goes to 4, goes to 5, goes to 6, right? Each stair is guarded by a boss, right? That's the very boring, Mario NES version of the dungeon. Legend of Zelda. But what I was saying about a sub-level is a sub-level can just be basically a link, or it can just be a termination, where it's basically just like a fun bonus level that you go to just to, maybe get some cool treasure or experience some cool monsters. But it's a cool way to sort of expand the dungeon without actually having to like reprint new volumes and stuff like that. You could have bonus difficulty, extra stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff that you could do with the lost levels. This is just design architecture, Creppy. The actual I would really prefer, in all of my fashion, for it to be true maps, for sure. Yes, DLC. Actual drawn, 10-foot squares, with elements to that. Maybe it's a controversial point. But I'm going to share. I've told this story, but it was probably a long time ago, because I don't think I've told the story until a long time ago. The last real main mega dungeon I ran was a mega dungeon called Dragon's Delve. And the primary person who mapped it, and it was designed in a very, halls and corridors and rooms and chambers kind of way. And the main person who mapped it was a friend of mine named Zach, who was not one of my, old school from middle school D&D crew. He was a friend of my girlfriend who we met, and he had never really played RPGs, just video games. And he ended up joining our campaign. He had a dwarf paladin named Volk, very cool guy. He was the primary mapper. But what was so cool, we played that campaign for probably about 2.5, 3 years. And one of the key things about that dungeon was that I didn't allow you to fast travel. You had to you had to describe what you were doing. Now, don't get me wrong, the party eventually discovered portals and teleporters and all this other jazz. But for the very longest time, they had to kind of know where they were going. And very early on, Zach he just didn't need the map anymore. He would just say, okay, we're going to enter the dungeon. We're going to go south. We're going to take a left at the first intersection. We're going to go through the mural room. We're going to go to, they had their own we had our own lingua franca. He'd say, we're going to go to the poop chute. We're going to go down the poop chute to level 2. Once we're at level 2, we're going to stick to the right-hand wall. And he doesn't even have a map in front of him. There's no VTT. Like, we're just sitting. He literally knew the dungeon. And this is, again, where I'm being biased, and I'm putting my I guess my old schoolness in there. I grew up playing MMOs like EverQuest, and some of the big dungeons weren't instances back then. They were just really big, really confusing zones with lots of rooms and changing levels, and just there was no auto mapper. Okay, so when you went to a dungeon like Gook, or when you went to a dungeon like the Estate of Unrest or Gook or any of these other places, like, you had to learn it. And there was like this fun and pride in like knowing how to navigate that space. And I think that is something that, when people talk about like, why is exploration so boring? I think that's part of it, is because people don't get that sense of mastery that they used to get, because we've offloaded too much of the exploration elements to the character rather than the player, or maybe we've just completely automated it, or even just completely got rid of it. And I would be lying to you. And now you may not agree with me, but for me, a big part of the fun of a mega dungeon is going into this unknown, dangerous place, a place that you might even have a sort of fear of. And that as time goes by, not only does your character become stronger, but like you become a veteran. And what used to be a place that you were uncomfortable becomes a place where you are comfortable. You know how this place works. You know its nuances, its intricacies. You know that, don't make too much noise on level 3. You know where the secret doors are. You know how to quick. Oh, we need to get to level 5. I know a shortcut to level 5. You know it like the back of your hand. And there's this very strong sense of mastery. But because of the modern design of games, there's no reason to do that, because you usually only go to a place once, right? When or maybe 2 or 3 times as you complete the adventure. But the chances that you go through a room multiple times is very low. Usually you go into that room once. You beat the monster that's there, you move on, right? And then you beat Nualia, at the end of Burnt Offerings at the first adventure of Rune Lords, and then you never go back to Thorn Keep again, right? Ever. You're done with it, or whatever it's called. Keep Thorn. I don't remember what it's called. I think it was called Thorn Keep. No, maybe it was called something else. But you never go back there, right? You're done with that. Moving on. So like that is something that I think is very, very appealing. Excuse me, one second. Okay. That is very, very appealing to me, because it's that player level of mastery, not just the characters, but the players themselves. The players get good at the dungeon, and I love that. I'm looking through this binder to see if I have any of my players' maps. I don't think I do. Now, Mark Lore says, I've tried letting the players map the dungeon multiple times, but on VTT that has proved to be quite challenging. I'm curious what you mean by that, because my believe it or not, my preferences for how players would map on a VTT would be that you would just map on a piece of graph paper. You might have one person mapping or 2 people mapping. I am very not about having the players move their minis through the dungeon. I think that is horrible. I've done it. I've played as that, and I've also run it like that. And I have come to the conclusion that I think it is a net negative, like in every single possible way. I see very little advantage to it for a variety of reasons. Which I could get into, but so I don't know what you mean by mapping. So for me, if I was playing in a dungeon, I was playing on a VTT, I would be like, yeah, I mean, the person who's mapping would just map, like on a piece of paper in front of them, and they might tell the player, the other players might be like, where are we going? Maybe 2 people map, whatever, whatever like that. I mean, maybe you have some sort of, I don't know, whiteboard software or something that you could use, because to be clear, now this isn't always the case, but there's a lot of times where my dungeon, like I'm a player, okay? I'm a player. You might see something like this, okay? Like that means stairs down. That means stairs up, right? So sorry. So stairs up, and it's like, and that means door, and then it's like, okay, that went to my room, and there was like a long corridor here. It's like Mountain. You know, this literally might be like what my map that as a player I'm drawing. You know, you know, I'm guesstimating here. You know, right? Like this is kind of what this is what my map as a player ends up looking like. Very, very rarely does my map look like you know, as a player. You know, look like this. You know, that you know, you could do it that way, but honestly, most of the purpose of a map is for you to be able to navigate. And that's all it needs to be able to do. In fact, some of the there's one of the maps that it's great. It's what is it of? It might be of the Caves of Chaos. There's a map hanging up in Aaron's basement. I'm not sure who was mapping. Bob might have been mapping, but Bob started mapping, and at one point, you know, he got to the end of his graph paper, and he was like, "Shit!" And then Aaron was like, "Cool," and he like ripped a piece of graph paper off, and then stuck it, and we taped it over, and he just continued the map. You know what I mean? Like, so it looks. You know, it was all ghettoed together. But it's a great like artifact, you know, of the map in that respect. And I mean, again, I don't know what physical grip means, but you know, for me, you know, to say, you know, you stand at the precipice of a long corridor. Arched stone way extends out in front of you as far as your flickering torchlight can see, 40 or 50 feet before the shadows enclose around it. Just at the edge of your torchlight, you can see an oaken door on the left side of the corridor. What do you do? I find that to be far more evocative. And the players go, you know, let's cautiously move to the doorway. And I go, very well. You begin proceeding down the doorway, 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. More of the details of the corridor begin to fill in as your torchlight begins filling the hall. 40 feet, 50 feet, and you reach the doorway. You now see that the corridor extends another further 40 feet to the north, but is still lost in darkness. No other signs of doorways, left or right. The door to your left, set into an archway of paved stones, has a large brass knocker set in the middle of it. You know what I mean? Like, and, you know, Mark Lore, some people want to do that. And, you know, that's fine if that's what you're, you know, down for. Good night, Glenn. If the GM and the players are both very comfortable with that, I think that's a totally reasonable thing to do. But Mark Lore, just in case that is the case, I also have a rule, Mark Lore, that I use, which is I keep most of my rooms square, rectangular. I really try to avoid unnecessary, you know, there's a lot of weird dungeon rooms that are just weirdly shaped, you know, for no fucking good reason. If I have a room like this, it better be an important room. You know what I mean? Like if I have some, you know, if I have some room and it's called like the Temple of Time or something like that, and it's, you know, it's shaped like this, you know, okay, fine. You know, like, you know, it's shaped like an hourglass with these sloped walls, whatever. But if this is just, you know, guard room number 6, please, you know, just make it a square. 30 square, 40 square, you know, 30 foot by 50 foot rectangular room. Right? I make things easier to map and quicker to do, assuming that you have players who are going to want to do this, you know. And 99% of the time, the dimensions of the room don't matter anyways. And 99% of the time, 99% of the time, if you're playing Theater of the Mind, it really doesn't matter. You know, it really doesn't matter. You know, and yes, in the old school way, you know, if somebody really wanted to pace out a room, the GM might say, fine, that's going to take, you know, close to 30 minutes or an hour. And you're like, okay, well, that's a couple random amount encounter checks, you know, or whatever like that. They also need a reason to be fucked up because people don't just randomly build rooms like that, you know. The other problem is that like when you have a map for something, people think it's a fight, and also too, quite frankly, whether it's a subconscious thing. Okay, like let me tell you something. I'm being honest with you here. It's a moment of honesty. Okay, I'm not now. Granted, I think I've evolved past this, but back in the day, if we're playing in person, but back in the day, if the players whatever go into a chamber and I roll a random encounter and I get 2d6 orcs. Okay, whoa, 11 orcs. And I grab my dry erase marker and I get my battle maps and I draw the corridor the players are in. And then I draw the room and, it's got this weird angle and this little cut. And I draw that. And then, okay, the room's got 5 pillars. I don't want it to just be a blank room. The room's got a pillar here and a pillar there and a pillar there and a pillar there and a pillar there. And there's a fountain that's dried out in the middle of the room. And maybe I'll try to do a little bit of artistic drawing here, whatever. And I'll draw that. And then I go into my box or I go to my shelf and I get my minis. I get my orc minis and I'm looking through my minis. Okay, goblins, hobgoblins. No, okay, here's my orcs. Okay, cool. All right. I get 8 orcs. I put them down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, I get a cool looking orc. He's like the chieftain. I put him there. And yeah, like if the players go, now if I'm playing a game, I just did all that. And then we're playing a game and then the players are like, I want to talk to the orcs. I'm kind of like, fuck you. Like the orcs attack. I just did all that day. I just set up all that shit. The players say we leave. So when you think about so when you think about modern games, I'm talking about 5e D&D, I'm talking about Pathfinder 2nd Edition. You don't, you can lie to yourself, but come on. It's us. It's me. When the players go into that room, the players know, the GM knows, the adventure writer knows, the game system knows they're going to be fighting those monsters. So yeah, I guess it does make sense that you should probably have that. If you're playing on a VTT, you should have the fucking map ready to go because you're going to need it. You're going to need your orc tokens that you bought because you bought the miniatures because the party's going to be fighting them. The part that that's going to end in a fight. Hell, if you look in the adventure, it says 11 orcs are in this room. They attack on sight. They fight to the death, right? Everything about this thing is set up for you to fight these monsters. The players are looking at their character sheet full of combat-related feats. They are ready to fight these monsters. Everyone is on board to fight these monsters. So that is a mentality that you need to have. But when you're playing Shadowdark, when you encounter those 11 orcs, I'm going to roll my 2d6. Oh, shit. I literally did just roll 12. I literally just rolled a 12. I rolled double sixes. They're like, greetings, friend. And suddenly there's not a fight. Well, I mean, there might be a fight, but fundamentally there doesn't have to be a fight because the reaction roll was they're friendly, or at least they want to be friends. So yeah, you don't need to set that up. We don't have minis we don't have, we don't need any of that stuff anyways. And I'll also be completely honest with you, as a GM, I don't want to play on a VTT because I don't want to make those goddamn maps and I don't want to draw those stupid fucking, what are they called? The vision walls. So what does that mean? Well, it probably means that the only thing I'm going to play on a VTT is something that somebody else already wrote and I can buy it from. Because they already did all that shitty work for me. Right? So, it puts me into a weird space where like now I feel like I have to use something that somebody else made because people are expecting that and I don't want to do that and I don't have ain't nobody got time for that. So now you have to buy that. And so then it doesn't have that, all that other stuff. So no, that's fine. I mean, if people are paying money for stuff, that's cool. Like you deserve to get what you want. But I'm saying like in terms of like, what I would want out of that experience. Anyways, part of the reason why I was just completely just like, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I really was really thrilled, interested by that Tunnels and Trolls game with that threat rating. That's so cool. Oh my God. If you didn't watch that, number one, I was sponsored. So if you do go check it out, just saying, late pledge is still available. But I was really tickled by that threat rating. I was like, what a cool way to do theater of the mind style fighting. That was really cool. That was really neat. So yeah, anyways, we kind of got off topic. But anyways, logistics is that I think the way that I would be best served to do this would be to do it as a multi-volume thing. And hearing from the Shadowdark people, I think trying to keep it digest sized and probably keeping it, black and white style. Now like Shadowtide is a little different. Shadowtide is a very different feel, right? We're going for, that noble dark style of game. But Shadowdeep is, it's Shadowdark. It's it's gonna be kind of this, kind of grimy, grimy, dungeony, type thing, which I'm totally fine with. And so like aesthetically, I want it to match, your role for combat bestiaries that you get from for Shadowdark, compatible with Shadowdark. I want it to match your Western reaches books and your Shadowdark books. I want it to look good, right, compared to all of them. And I want to work with Steven to get the same printer and stuff like that to make it look like a Shadowdark book in that respect, so that it looks good on your table. But ultimately, it is going to be my own thing. Black, white, and blue. No, well, the blue is classic. The blue. The reason that color blue is there is so that you couldn't photocopy it back. The photocopiers back then couldn't do that blue. It was like not enough contrast, and so if you tried to photocopy it, it would just be pure white. Because I guess back in the day they were worried about people buying it and then copying it and selling it. And they figured if you couldn't copy the maps, how useful was the rest of the adventure? Because the adventure was basically the map. So, nice, Ray. Thank you. Appreciate it. The blue is nice. I'm not gonna lie. The blue is it's a nice color. It's got a lot of memory tied up into it, doesn't it? Sure does look nice. What I got over here. I gotta have a keep on the Borderlands here somewhere, right? Maybe I don't. I thought I did. Jesus, where'd I put that stuff? Yeah, who the hell knows? Anyways, very cool. And then my crazy weird idea, which I'm definitely gonna maybe take offline to the Patreon, is like, can we use hex flowers, for random encounter generation? There's something about this that I think has a lot of potential. I don't know if it's too crazy or if it's too insane, but there's a part of me that really likes this idea. As crazy as it may seem, I think it's kind of a cool idea. Because like I said, I like the idea of that building tension, and I really did like Evan's idea of, as the dice pool builds up, there's a greater chance for you can get that really bad encounter. So I thought that idea was really, really, I thought that idea was really cool. But I was like, but what I didn't like about it was that it still didn't necessarily reflect the situation that you were in. I like the idea that you might get a preview of what was coming first. And so that's where I was like, I want you to sort of get an indication that you're on that road. And so originally what I was even thinking, like, someone was talking about the clocks, the clocks were mechanics. So originally I was thinking like, okay, you could have like a random table, 2 through 20. And then like, if you roll an 8, okay, which is like goblins, maybe there's some kind of like they were saying, like maybe the first time you get goblins, you get signs of goblins, and the second time you get a small band, and then the third time you get a major band, or whatever the case is. But then I was thinking about it, I was like, well, yeah, but like, what if I encounter goblins, but then I leave the dungeon and I come back? Now, do I just go straight back to the dungeon? Like, so now am I priced into only fighting adventurers? Like, what if I like the idea that maybe the players could do stuff that sort of erases this. And then I was like, what am I going to do? Track a clock for every single, creature that's on this entry? And I was just like, like it's just a little bit too much. And I was like, okay, what is a piece of OSR tech? I don't even remember how I thought about this, but I was like, what's a piece of OSR tech that everybody loves but nobody uses? Like, oh, hex flowers, you know? Right. There's a lot of clocks. There's a lot of clocks going on. But also, too, it doesn't solve my issue, which is that I like the idea of your location on this, on this hex flower is also indicates what kind of encounter you're going to get next, right? Like an 8 might be a goblin, and you mark the first clock, but then the next thing that you roll might be an 18. And so it's like, okay, the goblins are, you ticked it once, you show them signs of the approaching threat, right? Very PBTA coded language. You see signs, you hear squeaky high-pitched voices or whatever. And that's really cool. But like, then the next thing I roll might be like, the ogre. And so, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like, it's like, wait, are there goblins or are there ogres? Like what's coming at us? And so I like the idea that as you kind of move into this really what you're modeling here is a probability field, and the other thing, which you make it sound cool, I will. Well, that's so Nimble. What you're experiencing, Evan, is the Derek problem, right? Where I'm always like, but we could do more. We could do it this way. We could do it this way. And, that's, again, I lack your discipline. I lack your ability to have that guidance to say, okay, but is the juice worth the squeeze? I'm too obsessed with systems. He's describing something completely different. I thought he was talking about the hex crawl, but so there you go. He's describing the player level of mastery in a Megadungeon. So each point representing a faction is nice, and playing with the directionality of the movement with the 2d6 to push it towards one point. Exactly, Shadram. This is where I talk about the levers and the numbers, right? You could even have a sort of de facto representation where each point on this chart sort of represents a different, faction or theme, right? Like if it doesn't necessarily have to be a faction, it could be a theme, right? Like, you might encounter zombies here, whites here, and then you encounter, the vampire necromancer here, Does that make sense? So like before, you'll never just randomly encounter the vampire necromancer. I mean, there's a slight chance that you could. Obviously, that's what's cool about this procedure. But more than likely, you'll first encounter zombies, and then then when you encounter a zombie, maybe you might encounter the vampire next. But the chances are probably pretty good that you might encounter more whites and more zombies, and then eventually, you might encounter the thing. So it's sort of like proceduralizes this ramping of threat, which I think is really, really cool. Especially, again, if the players, kind of learn to learn this. And to say nothing of the fact that as a GM, this just gives you a lot of cool, fun ways to, I'm just thinking of the game tech, of how you make areas and particular areas, more dangerous. And like I said, you might enter an area and it just immediately puts you here. You're in the danger zone. Or like there could be an effect that says when this happens, move the players one tier outwards, or like the players take actions and they move, south, But yeah, so there's a bunch of different things that you could do, like in this, I randomly copied this off of the internet, but like in this one, it's just a D6, but in most hex flowers, you're doing some sort of 2d6. So there's kind of rare events versus everything else being, obviously most of the time you're going to get this movement, So when you look at this weather chart, right, the tendency is for the weather to get less severe, right? You can see that. So yeah, we know hex C2 is X is a cool bit for the player's turn, right? I enjoy that bit of player mastery, Pumpkin, for sure. Other than using go-to moves, how do you prevent just circling safely in the hex flower? I mean, there is of course, there is always a percentage chance that the players could theoretically just never move into the second tier, but yeah. But I mean, I think I would just trust to the random encounter rolls, I suppose, at that point. I'm not sure. I mean, I'd have to really think about the system, Nate. Oh, that's a good point, Stan. You're not entirely wrong there. But also, I think it's important to realize that, like, generally speaking, it's unlikely that I would have like an undead zone. You know what I mean? Specifically. And if I did have an undead zone, Stan, I mean, I think part of what would make it an undead zone is that each new room you would go to would move you into that encounter space. That's kind of almost what would define it, you know? What's up, Agile Monk? Good to see you, brother. I don't think I quite understand that panic. Every node gets its own flower. Yeah, okay. Let's not go too far. I mean, I'm trying to do what I can, you know, to keep it somewhat reasonable. I mean, obviously, like I said, we would just put a big optional thing here because, you know, the default would just be roll a d6. You know, on a 1, you get a random encounter, you know, and then you roll on this table. That's the way it's worked for 45 years, you know. Which is fine, you know. When in doubt, it's worked. I'm just, you know, can we do some other stuff? Hey, Lord Kyler, thank you so much supporting that process. Look at that, supporting Project Shadowdeep. Cheers. And you know what? We held in there, people. The stream quality, shit. But you know what? We are stronger. We are stronger than the internet. Let's see. All right. Well, right now, let's see where we're at right now. Because now okay. Yeah. So it was right now I'm getting 350 megabits up. So right now it was a problem with it must have been a problem with my internet because I was getting 10. So right now my internet is literally 35 times faster than it was earlier, which is why we haven't had any problems. And why we haven't had a drop frame in a long time. So, okay. 15 insight. Sure. Let's do it. Let's do it. Just because we're here, you know, again, if you guys have questions, by all means, please ask, you know. So let me find that one. Where was it? Here we go. Okay. Can we grab this? No, I locked it. Unlock it. There we go. Yep. Oh. Okay. All right. It's weird that right-clicking it unlocks it here, but there's no lock. And to lock it, you have to go up here. Microsoft. Okay, so we are going to make a little doodad here. Yeah, no, oh, there we go. And what, is this not going to let me make this bigger? Sheesh, this thing sucks. What the hell, Microsoft? Okay. So this is the party, okay? So we start with the weather, and we say, hey, the weather is partly cloudy and a little bit rainy, okay? And then we say, okay, I'm going to take my 2d6. All right, you don't have to trust me here. I got my 2d6 right here. and we say, what is the weather going to be tomorrow? You know, so we roll. Now, we're rolling 2d6. So the average is that we are going to get a 7, right? With a 6 and an 8 being also very likely. So more often than not, the weather is going to tend towards getting better, right? Rather than getting worse. All right. So we roll, and I shit you not, I just rolled double 12s. Let's ignore that for a moment. Because that doesn't help my. All right, so we got a 5. So we move to cloudy. Okay. So now that the weather is cloudy, now there's a chance that tomorrow we might have severe thunderstorms. We might have severe rain, light rain. There's even a chance that we could go back the way we came, but the chances are pretty good that tomorrow we're going to get rain because look, we're surrounded by rain, regardless of what we roll. Now remember, this table, because of the location of where the 6 and the 7 are, along with is going to trend to push us down into the left. Okay, going up is very rare because it only happens on a 2, a 3, a 10, or 11, 12. By the way, I should note we could change these numbers completely. We could change these odds completely, but the odds that we get severe weather tomorrow are still fairly unlikely. So now we're going to roll, and we rolled. We got a 10. So ironically, we go right back to where we were. It was cloudy. Now it's partly cloudy. So now we roll again. Okay, we got a 10. So now we have a bit of a heat wave. Right? So it's a way that the player, instead of because the way that most people think about weather, you look in your DMG book and there's a random weather and you roll it, every day? And it's still a joke for in our campaign, because in one of Smith's campaigns, he did that. And I remember it was like a heat wave. And then the next day there was a blizzard and a tornado. And, which almost killed us or something like that. So, the joke, because he was just rolling on the percentage table, right? But that percentage table had no memory. Now, I heard somebody say earlier, couldn't you do the same thing with a deck of cards? You could. I mean, deck of cards potentially could have memory. But then that's like a way you'd have to funnel in new tracks and new charts. But unfortunately, the other thing with a deck of cards, though, is it doesn't understand what your current state is. It has a memory, but it doesn't necessarily understand where your current state is, whereas a hex flower does. Right. Yes. It was the Ohio Weather Edition. Correct. 100%. And so, again, that's something that you can, do. Now, what you could imagine is, let's say that we're here. And again, I'm spitballing here. Let's say that a druid casts a spell. Or ritual. Let's say we're not playing D&D. We're playing a cooler game like Dungeon World or something. I don't know. But you have a druid, and they beseech the animal spirit. They beseech the spirits of wind and rain, and they speak to the. Yeah, we're playing Fabula Ultima. Thank you, Wes. And an elementalist does a ritual and attempts to soothe the angered spirits of the sky and succeeds. Cool. What does that mean? What if we take our 3d6 roll now, okay, or we roll a 3d6 and we pick, or we drop the lowest, or we drop the highest, right? Or again, we're changing all these other things here, but you can see that we by basically giving our roll advantage. Okay, in this case, we would we'd want more mild weather, so we want a 6 or a 7. I'm not sure what a way is that you can average out a 2d6 roll easier. I'm doing the math. D6, no. D4, no. Maybe. We could do something I don't know. Now we roll a D4 plus 3, or D4 plus 4. I'm just making this up. And so now we can't get, or D4 plus 5. Now we can't get a 10 or 11 or a 12 or a 2 or a 3. We literally can't make the weather worse. right? It's still random, but now it's a D4 plus 4. So I roll my D4. Oh, look, I got a 4, which is an 8. And now the weather goes to here, right? And now the next day, oh, I got a 2. So we got a 6. So we move down. You see what I mean? Like the weather can't, the weather can't get worse because of the way that we changed it mechanically. And yeah, I mean, this is a generic weather table, but you might have a different hex flower. This is just specific to weather. You might have a different hex flower for the desert. You might have a different hex flower for the rainforest. In the rainforest, this extreme position at the top might be a cloudless, day. Like a pleasant rain could be this in the desert, right? The rare event, the way that this table is set up, right? And you're talking about Shadowdeep. Well, certainly each level would have its own random encounter table. For sure. Each region, it depends. It depends on how bifurcated we want to be about that and how distinct we want them to be, I would say. I think you have to be very careful about that because I do feel like that's getting into a juice and a squeeze situation. I will say, Pumpkin, that obviously something like level 3, which we have currently as a split level, level 3A would have a different table than level 3B, right? Because we want them to feel different and substantially be different. And this is just another great way of mechanically reflecting how different areas and different places of the dungeon can be and can feel, right? Imagine you go to level 4, and on level 4, what if even the central space wasn't safe, So Nimble's saying, yeah, I think players can only move inward or outward on the hex flower. Different rooms can move them around it. That's actually kind of a cool idea too. Especially like I said, if we were, I don't know where Evan is, but we talked about tying different factions or themes to different points around the region. So what this basically becomes then? This becomes threat. It becomes threat from Tunnels and Trolls, right? This is threat 0, this is threat 1, this is threat 2, and this is threat 3, Right? Exactly. So typically, you have different. You could have different rules, Wes, depending on what you want to do. But usually, you wrap around to the other side. Usually. But yeah, it's like a threat per region. Exactly. Correct. 15 insight. Correct. You could use it to simulate navigating a dungeon. You are 100% correct. But the idea is that it is mapping the probability space that you are going to have a certain type of encounter that is different and independent from where you are in the dungeon. Because in a traditional dungeon, right, the random encounters technically can occur anywhere, right? If I just, I don't know, let me find some random mega dungeon map here. Right, this is from Dyson Logos, who is goated, by the way. But right, if this is map 28 of the Scavenger's Deep, we might have several factions on this level. Right, we could have a Duragar mining faction, and then we have a whatever were-rat dungeon, faction over here. But you typically, the way that most people have it written, is you have just one random encounter table. And when you're walking through the dungeon, you roll on the random encounter table. And, you could be over here and encounter were-rats. Or you could be over here and encounter Duragar. Even though, quote-unquote, the Duragar regions slash coded encounter areas are over here, and the were-rat areas are coded and keyed over here. Now, you could create a separate random encounter table for this part of the room, for this part of the dungeon, and this part of the dungeon, but I quite frankly have never really seen anyone do this, and quite frankly, it's a lot of work, and I don't know that it's worth it. Yeah. Nimble suggesting, can you go any direct? You can go any direction from center. Rolling a 3 to 6 moves you out into the left, 7 to 11 out into the right, 2 and 12 back and inward. That's kind of cool. I mean, because again, I do want the danger to generally creep up, and I just still like the idea that generally speaking, it doesn't. I mean, as a GM, you can still make a decision. Hey, you did something really dangerous. I'm going to push you forward. Hey, you did something really safe. I'm going to move you back. But that's kind of a cool idea too. I like that. If we're just using a D12, gives us pretty good, 1 and 12, 1 and 12. That's not bad. Nimble. Plus I like the D12s. Absolutely and absolutely. Do the players become aware they are getting closer to having a specific type of encounter? Yes. Doesn't that take away from the surprise aspect? Yes. Now, I would say there would probably be a sidebar that I would describe, and I would say, look, if immersion is the most important thing to you and suspension of disbelief is everything, don't share this information with your players. But like when I do a mega dungeon panic, I give my players a copy of the random encounter chart. I put some of the monsters that are on it already on it. They know what number will generate it because they have an idea of what's in this dungeon. And I encourage them as they discover things to start filling it out. Oh, we know that when Derek rolls a 5 on the random encounter chart, we get trolls. When Derek rolls a 6, the gelatinous cube comes rolling around. I enjoy my players to have that knowledge. For me, it makes the satisfaction of engagement. For me, the satisfaction of engagement and the player aspect of beating the dungeon is more important to me than the immersive aspect of people forgetting that they're playing a game and it's like we're really there. I don't think mega dungeons are really good for that. I don't think dungeons are good for that at all, period. I mean, the dungeons are fundamentally a challenge-based environment, Yeah. Now, would I fill it out for them initially? No, I think part of the fun of it is knowing we're getting close to something super dangerous and we may not know what it's going to be, but we know that we are in danger. The tension, if the players are unaware that they're in danger, then the whole aspect of building the tension doesn't work. The whole point of this is a meta mechanic so the players feel the growing sense of tension that should accompany them when they're going into a dungeon, right? And the idea is, what I'm trying to emulate is, you ever play a video game? I'm trying to think of the classic video game. What's the game? With the blocks. Minecraft. You ever play Minecraft and you're digging and then you hear the creeper before you see the creeper? You hear that. You hear that noise, and you're digging, through the ground or whatever like that. And you're getting close to something, and you put the pickaxe away, you get out your diamond blade, you know what I mean? Like there's going to be something nearby, and then you claw through the one door and then you discovered a dungeon or whatever like that. So it's this idea that I want the players to sort of feel, hear, smell, know that the zombies are closing in on them, or that there's zombie. There's a definitely okay. What's the mod? Is it a zombie? I don't know. Whatever. Sorry. Okay, it's a zombie. Okay. I mean, I've told my story before about I'm going to tell it again because it's been a while since I told this story. Let me tell you my final story of Minecraft. I never played it again. We had a communal server. This is early Minecraft before it became the big thing that it is. And we had our private server for me and my friends, and everybody was doing different things. Smith was going into the Nether and fighting dragons. I was having fun with redstone. And I built this really, 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 really complicated, involved. I mean, at the time, there's probably been 700,000 updates to the game. But at the time, you could grow crops, and then if water fell over the crops, it would knock all of the wheat and grain off of the crops, and it would get carried around with the water. So I had this really complicated, like tiered agricultural thing that would auto grow these crops, and then when you pushed a button, it would like release this water, and the water would flow over the fields, gather all the crops, pull it all down through chutes, and then put it into like a mine cart and take it back to our base. And I built this like really elaborate system, and the primary redstone CPU and dam reservoir system was up on this really elaborate thing. And I noticed that I had like 5 torches or something, across, and like the one torch that was supposed to be in the middle was like off by 1 square. Like it was too far to the right. And so like I clicked off of it to move it. And while I was trying to get lined up, it was dark. And while I was trying to get lined up, a creeper spawned. And I was like, no, don't. And it blew up. And it just blew up my whole dam. It blew up all my redstone. And I quit Minecraft and I never played again. That was it. It was game over forever. It was probably like 15 years ago or something, maybe even longer. Okay, but yes. Anyways, I was talking about a zombie when I was going, but yeah, the idea is that I want there to be that acknowledgement of the dread, and I want you to sort of build towards it. And again, it also gives us this. It avoids, because if you were just using a traditional, what's the word I was looking for? If you're doing a traditional weather table, like you might find in your DMG book, you could literally go from a bright sunny day, and then you're like, well, let me roll for the weather for tonight, and it's like deathly thunderstorm, and so again, the idea of the hex flower is that you have a random state with a memory. There is no significance of the weather. That's just the example that I didn't make this. Let me be very clear about that. I just grabbed this off the internet. Hex flowers are nothing new. I definitely did not create them. But see, that's the thing, Roman. It was lit up. Okay, I just moved the torch, and while it was clicked off, it was thing. Yes, it's just an example. Yeah, I'm not actually using the weather table. I don't care what the weather is in Shadowdark or Shadowdeep. I did not see your question earlier about dynamic random encounter stuff. Sorry. So, Nimble still catching up. Thinks there's something about the hex flower idea. I'm cooking on it. Yeah, so this is just an example. I mean, if you do TTRPG, weather, or hex flowers, you'll see a ton of examples of them. Blog articles, a lot of OSR stuff. It's very popular in the OSR, which is good for us, right? I know that somebody built a redstone that plays Doom or something, right? Like or something, or plays Snake or something. Yes, that is exactly what they are. They are random rolls with a state memory. Yep, that's exactly what it is. It's a dice roll that remembers its prior dice roll. Now it only has 1 unit of memory, right? There are ways that you can change and have 2 factors of movement. Like if you change the die size as well, now you can have 2 states of memory, right? Technically, we have 2d6, so we could have 3 states of memory, right? We could have the location, the die A, die B, and we can change so we can have multiple states of memory. My question was basically, how would you do those story-based encounters with the hex flower where it unfolds with each new encounter? I'm not sure I 100% know what you're talking about. Do you mean like do you mean like it's nighttime and so now you can encounter this thing? Is that what you're talking about, Pumpkin? Well, because remember, Pumpkin, fundamentally, where you are on this hex flower isn't necessarily the same thing as the encounter that you are encountering. You know what I mean? So you could still have a thing where when you get to this location, you only encounter the vampire death knight if it's nighttime. Otherwise, something else. Right? So you could still have that. You could still have conditional stuff in these hexes. For sure. Check your Discord DM. I made a bad mock-up. Look, Evan's already done. Look at this. Like the game is over. All right, here we go. This is Evan. Of course, his is more simple than mine, but the same idea here. If you move off the grid, you get the encounter. So there you go. So like if you go to goblins and then if you go off this way, you get the hard encounter. If you go off this way, you get the medium encounter. If you go off this, and this is the first hex is the sign of the creature. So this is, I mean, this is a more elegant and basic way of doing it. But yes, this is basically the idea, right? That you kind of get the teaser. Now the way that Evan has done it, there is no way to go from the goblins to the dragon, right? So this is that you get the sneak preview, and now there is a chance that you might fall back, right? That you might fall back to the green space. You saw the signs of the goblins, and then nothing happened. But more than likely, okay, you're going to roll a 2 through 10, and you're going to get some kind of goblin encounter. But there's a 10% chance that you might go back to the center, right? So it could be just a bit of spoiler, right? So it's either a foreshadow or it's a spoiler. You obviously can, mess around and play around with that, but there you go. I mean, this is a fantastic way to do it in a very, very different way. The other thing too is, you could change what this means, for example, maybe there's a different type of goblin and you have a higher rating, a higher chance to get a hard encounter here. Or maybe the orcs are all, has a much different chance of there's no such thing as an easy orc encounter. It's just a hard orc encounter. And these are the kind of numbers that you could change, by the way, as you fight and deal with the goblins and to that nature. Or, if you wanted to be more esoteric about it and be more random about it, you could also use these numbers to represent whether it's an encounter at all. I mean, I'm presuming when Evan writes this, he means a fight. But like you could easily have it be green is, they are neutral, yellow means that they are unfriendly, and red means that they are hostile and attack, right? So you could also use that as sort of your basis and premise as well. Instead of just assuming it's going to be a fight, you could assume what is the motivation or what is the reaction of the creature as well. And what is your stance on being able to completely exterminate some or all the monsters on a level? Like how many random fights with goblins it'll take? I don't know that we would have a specific number for that, Stan, but I'm a big fan of that. In fact, I've talked about that before in previous streams where you have a random encounter no, the way we were doing it, I said it was we were combining it with the danger roll, Pumpkin. That was the problem. Right? So you were combining it with the same pool that was also determining your frequency. That was what I didn't like about it. I didn't mind that you were doing it. I said I didn't like the way you were doing it. Hey, what's up, Adrian? Good to have you here. But I've talked before, Stan, about how like I might have were-rats on my random encounter table. If the party goes in and they kill the great rat mother, they kill the leader of the brood, I'm totally fine erasing that from the random encounter. And then and I don't replace it right. Maybe certainly not right away. Maybe ever. I know I still call him Pumpkin. Better than calling him Penguin. But I like showing the players that. See, this is a classic GM. It's a great idea, but then they execute it badly because you're taking a great winning moment and you're turning it into a bad moment. Okay, like the players go in and they kill the goblins, and then the GM immediately replaces them with gnolls, right? Like that is that the players don't get to enjoy the fruits of their labor. I love leaving that encounter spot empty. You guys killed the goblins. You drove them off. You struck a deal with them, and they agreed to take their banditry elsewhere. And now the players roll, and they're like, "Oh, 10, shit, goblins." I'm like, "Not anymore. No encounter." And the players are like, "Wait a second. So does that mean like the dungeon is safer right now?" And I'm like, "Yeah, the goblins aren't there. They would have been there, and they're not there yet." And so until something fills that same space and becomes a sort of default, whatever, if the goblins were common, then eventually maybe something else comes in and fills that space. Until that happens, nothing fills that space. And I mean, you could talk about the power dynamics and how quickly things change. And I mean, I think most things, maybe I read too much Tolkien, but things in Lord of the Rings and real life happen very slowly. I think things happen in D&D campaigns way too quickly. People are like, "Oh, they restock after a day," and I'm like, "A day?" But this is a problem born out of like modern mechanics where you heal to full overnight and everything like that. Like if you had a mid-level party in D&D and they got their asses beat, they went back to town. It might take you 35 days to get back all your hit points. So or longer. So then now you're talking about spans of time that are weeks or months. I've talked about it before, but in the One Ring adventure game from Free League, you go on every time you go on an adventure, which could last anywhere from a week to 2 weeks or whatever, 3 weeks. You return. And like in the movies, right? Like the party, they leave the Shire, they go through Bree, they cross the Eriador, and then they get to Rivendell, and they're like in Rivendell for like a month or 2 months, and then they leave Rivendell and they go south along the Misty Mountains, and then they turn back and try to cross Caradaros, and then they get turned back, and then they go through Moria, and then they go to Lorien, and they're in Lorien for like a good couple weeks, resting and recovering, and then they go on the thing. In the One Ring game, usually you might adventure for 2 weeks and then have like 4 to 6 weeks of quote unquote downtime, and then you take like 2 or 3 months off at the end of the year for Christmas. It's literally called the Yule season. You only go on 3 adventures a year. So, and an adventure isn't like a D&D adventure. An adventure is just like a couple of sessions. So that basically means that like every 8 to 10 sessions is like another year. So it's very common if you played like a 30, 40, 50 session the One Ring game, you might have 8 to 10 years pass in the game. Anyways, that's just a completely separate thing here. Let's see here. Right. Well, now we're getting into different areas, right? Because like, for example, I love the idea of factions having encounter reaction roles that are varied depending on past experiences with them, right? This gets back to the whole proceduralism of it, right? Yeah. There you go. Friendly, cautious, hostile. Could be Goblin Village, Goblin Shop, Goblin Arena. Yes. Taller, you are correct. We are talking about Hex Flowers. That's correct. Wes, take care, man. That's right. The adventure is 2 days broken by 3-month spans of talking to the bartender at the inn about nothing. So this is yeah, I mean, I'm weighing the pros and the cons because again, in my perfect world, right, you would get this cool piece of gaming tech that you could have at the table, right? The GM could track with a dry erase marker or some kind of token or something like that, right? Like to let you, figure out where you're at and where you're doing, what you're going, and where you. But anyways, there's some really cool stuff in here. I've only scratched the surface. There's a lot of other stuff. If you do a search for Hexflower, you're going to find a lot of stuff here. What if I wanted to ask if random rats are endless before the queen is dealt with? I don't understand what that means, Stan. Oh, I see. But before the HQ is cleansed, the random ones are functionally endless. I mean, as with all things, Stan, I mean, you could literally have a mechanic for it, or you could just make a call as a GM. I mean, that's fine too. I'm not against GMs just making decisions. At the end of the day, these are just tools to help the GM create fun, unexpected procedures. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for tools that put the GM into an unknown, uncertain, unexpected experience. And so that's that's sort of the deal that I'm trying to deal with, right? Which is dungeons have the encounters, written into them. I love that encounter, by the way, Shadram. I think Tomb of Abyss Thor might be like I think it might be my favorite module of all time. I don't know if I have it around here somewhere, but it is definitely the Vault of Lauren card. That one's good too. Tomb of Abyss Thor is absolutely incredible. It's amazing. And yes, the blood fountain. Love them. Thank you, Agile. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was thinking here. And again, it is different, and we could, write it as optional, and we could even just give people the option to just roll a d6. But I love the idea of the GMs getting fun little, tools to play with, because again, I think random encounters are such an important part for me of the element. It is the first room of the dungeon. It is. It literally is. Oh, what a great dungeon. The shrine, I believe. Let me see if I can get it right. It's the shrine of, I think it's like, is it like Muir and Thier or something like that? It's something like that. It's like Muir and Thier. It's a great adventure. Another adventure that I've run many times and no one's ever finished. I think that's it. But I'm kind of excited about the idea of doing it as a series of volumes. I think it's a lot cleaner. It's a lot nicer. And I'm also interested, again, like I said, I just had this idea this morning about about using the hex flowers, because again, inspired by when I was on Evan's stream and seeing what Evan had done with being inspired by the stuff I was talking about. And I liked his idea of the growing tension pool and then using the D6s sort of represent different states. And there was this idea that he had, like, where he's like, oh yeah, like you couldn't roll triple ones until you had at least 3 dice. And I was like, oh, okay, so you can't get the worst result until you're already sort of starting to build. It's very unlikely, but you can't even get it until you get at least 3 dice in your tension pool. And I was like, that's cool, because it kind of has a sense of kind of a memory. And I was like, oh, it's kind of like a hex flower, how you can't get to, this result on the hex flower until you are at least in one of these hexes. So if you're all the way over here in the very pleasant weather, you don't have to worry about, getting the dramatic, insane weather, right? So what if we alter the meaning of the outcomes on the flower based on the party's relationship to the factions? Maybe. I mean, again, this, there's a lot of things that are weird about me and different about me. But I mean, one of the biggest things for me is, I think things like the random encounters and the faction dynamics / relationships are like just as important, or if not more important, than the actual keyed room encounters. I sometimes feel like this is where a lot of people who design dungeons go wrong, right? Because I feel like what they do is they just get a bunch of cool ideas for cool keyed room encounters, and then they just kind of all throw them into like a map. Like, oh, imagine a room that like fills with acid, and there's like a puzzle, and the players have to solve it. And like, maybe that's a really cool encounter. It sounds fun, but like they do that, 15 times, and then they just put them all in this dungeon and call it good. That tends to lead towards more of a what most people would call a funhouse style dungeon. And I find that to be not as satisfying in the long run, because at the end of the day, it just feels like a bunch of random encounters. A bunch of just encounters that have no tie into anything else. Whereas, even the way that we've described random encounters with the hex flower, the memory, the dynamic random encounters, these are very much intimately tied in with the faction dynamics and with the relationship dynamics. So I think that's far more exciting, because I want my players to be able to see the influence and the change that they are making on the dungeon. I think that's what makes exploration fun. That's what having these encounters, these factions does. It creates these unique experiences that are unique to your own. I mean, sometimes it can lead to kind of some slapstick type silly stuff. But I remember when we went through the Caves of Chaos, one of the groups, I don't remember which group it was it the Orcs or something, the Hobgoblins? I don't know, one of them. The group, they ended up like basically worshiping the party as like their saviors, and then like they basically, it was kind of like we were kind of doing like a Firefly, our Mrs. Reynolds thing, where like due to the ceremony, like one of the pieces, I think it was Bob, like the Orcs chieftain's daughter was now his wife, and he was like, he was like, no, I don't want her. And it's like, oh, it's a great shame to not take her as your wife. And, we're just playing it for laughs, obviously. But, it was still fun, because instead of just being like a bunch of monsters that they could have fought and killed, which is what they would have been otherwise, and to what end, whatever. I mean, you fight and kill a trillion monsters over the course of the role-playing game, your life playing it. But, like, how many times did you accidentally get drunk with the orcs and then wake up in the morning and realize that you're married to the orc chieftain's daughter, and now you're trying to get out of the marriage? Like, yeah, it's a little slapsticky, but D&D is not serious game. So, like, what are we talking about here? I'm not saying that would be appropriate for every role-playing game, but, D&D is a game where you summon gigantic floating hands to fight with. So, yeah. Well, that's another thing that you can do, Marksome, right? Like, as a GM, it gives you a tool, it gives you a lever. If the players are doing something, I don't know, like, let's just, whatever reason, I'll use Evan's example. If the players are doing something, they're making they're fighting the zombies, and then they make up a bunch of ideas. Evan was saying, no lateral movements, but maybe you say, oh, like you start to see the slurping sound of the oozes coming in, because what you did and what you said. Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to, how do we communicate that information meaningfully, and how do we track it, in a way that makes the most sense. One of the things that is important to me is that this is usable in that sense. I mean, I want to try to get as much, juice out of the squeeze as I can, but I like the idea of the random encounter table having the memory. And so hex flowers are the way that I would normally do it, without feeling like I'm locked in to a sub table, right? And that, and avoiding the whole, like we talked about, that, like the clock thing, right? Which I think is cool. All right, well, somehow this turned into a 3-hour stream, even though it was terrible. So thank you guys for sticking with me for a while there while the stream was terrible and crap. We did it. We held in there. I'm excited. Again, we got a lot of things spinning. I just launched. We got Northern Reaches Season 4 launching Monday already. Wow, we've had a lot of people sign up. Great. I mean, I was worried. I was like, I don't know, we haven't talked about PF2 in a long time, but the PF2 fans are still out there. We're still reaching people. People are bringing in friends. It's going to be a great season. I'm really looking forward to it. Somewhat independently, one of our patrons, who is a bit of a Foundry dev guru, as in has worked on Foundry modules for major systems, finds themselves with a bunch of extra spare time for the next couple of months, and they were like, "So, what did you want to do with Wilder Feast?" And I was like, "Oh, I wasn't even thinking of Wilder Feast because I was like, I know I'm gonna have to change a lot of VTT stuff to even get that to work." And so now suddenly Wilder Feast has bubbled back up into my because I don't want to miss this opportunity. If I've got a dev who's got a bunch of free time and they're willing to work on Wilder Feast, I mean, who am I to say no? I mean, that's my golden goose right there. But then while all that's happening too, I do want to start doing my my One Ring solo play with you guys as a stream, but have my mega game be in the same world. So we're all playing in the same game. I just do it live. I also kicked off the scheduling sign up for 4 new Patreon games. I'm going to be running a game of Avatar Legends. I'm going to be running a game of Blades in the Dark. I'm going to be running a game of The One Ring. And I'm going to be running a game of Daggerheart. I'm going to be running those for patrons starting in May. And some of them, hopefully, will be allowed to be recorded. Probably just to the patrons. But it'll be a cool way to get those, what we call actual plays, right? Where it's not really made for looking good on TV. It's just a bunch of people playing and we're hitting record. But I'm looking forward to doing that, getting some reps with some of those game systems, and getting a chance to play with some of the patrons. Nervous is a little bit of a it's not the number I would use. I'm just always a little bit like hesitant, nervous, I guess would be the word, I guess, because of playing on a VTT. I always feel like I'm GMing with one hand behind my back when I'm playing, on a VTT, like, because I don't know the system and I don't know its limitations, and there might be some sort of weird, dumb technical snafu, and it's just going to cause this, like, and I tend to like get really bitchy and angsty and like, fuck this thing, I just want to like crash, like you saw me tonight with like the technical difficulties, just being like, it's not working, I want to go run away. So yeah. Anyways, so I'm always a little nervous when I'm running a VTT game, especially with one I haven't run on VTT before. And so while I would be very comfortable sitting down and running Daggerheart in person or the One Ring in person, now suddenly I've got to like also play it on a VTT, and it's just always it's not a very smooth sticking point to me. Again, nervous, maybe it's more like I feel like I'm somewhat hampered. Nimble game when? I don't, maybe, we talked about maybe running it. I want to run some sort of like mega dungeon thing. Not mega dungeon, that's the wrong word. They used to call it a dungeon delve at Gen Con, where they would build this huge dungeon out of Dwarven Forge, and they'd set it up on tables, and over the course of the convention, it was kind of a death gauntlet, but over the course of the convention, people would sign up for it, and you would play, and you'd try to fight your way to the end of the table. And usually by like the end of the convention, players, after many deaths, would get all the way to that. And Bob, I've ever since I told Bob about this, he just loves the idea. And especially because, like, I'm just stealing these ideas from back when they did it, but like you'd get like sticker sheets with little skulls, and whenever a PC dies, you take a sticker sheet off and you put the skull on the map where they died, so by the time you get to like Saturday, the con's been running for 3 days, the dungeon is just littered with all these skull stickers, and then they finally get to it. So obviously our scale is a bit different. We don't have thousands of people, we have like 40 people, but I kind of want to do something in that scale or size. And I was like, oh, maybe we can, I want to run something easy, quick, simple, nimble. I was like, maybe Nimble will be the game that we run for that or something like that. We'll see. Stan, I can't promise that. My general philosophy is if any player, and I usually ask them anonymously, or rather, they don't do it publicly. I just say, do any of you have any objections? You don't even have to explain to me why. Do any of you have any objections to being recorded? And if you do, that's cool. And if you don't, are you okay with this being shared on YouTube or not? And if anybody says no, then the answer is no. Right? This is a gift. This is a reward to my patrons. So it's not like me trying to monetize it. It's not me trying to do anything. If everybody's cool with it, I'm cool with it. If no one's cool, if even one person isn't cool with it, it's not going to happen. That being said, Stan, most of my patrons are much more comfortable with sharing just within our closed bubble. They don't want to be out on the internet for literally anyone everywhere. Our Patreon is just a couple hundred people. And I would just say, if you really want to watch those games, you can join the Patreon for just like $5. So just saying. I thought about running Nimble using the Immortals. There's a crossover. That's pretty cool. Yes, I hope so too, Stan, but chances are probably pretty good that, we might not get all of them, Stan, but hopefully we can get some of them, but generally speaking, people are usually okay with the Patreon. And we have some people who are very, but then I tell people I prefer you to use a camera, but if you don't want to use a camera, you don't have to use a camera. It's fine. We can just embrace more, If anything, I would tell you, maybe I'll do this. I'll say, if you don't use a camera, which is fine, at least let me send you your character art and put that in as your character. Because that way, at least we're seeing something instead of just like a blank box or your name. Like, give us something to work off of, Because I GM very much by like watching people, I'm watching for your body language and stuff. It's another reason that running things online is a little tough for me. Cool. Well, we made it. It was a rough stream, but I don't know. I'm getting more excited. Like I said, we got a bunch of irons in the fire. We Smith is still working on our sort of initial pass of Shadow Tide. Still working on the boats. While he's doing that, I've kind of reawakened Shadowdeep, and we're working on that. And we got a bunch of mega games. Northern Reaches Season 4 kicking off Monday. I know Bob just made a post that he's going to be picking back up Dragon Tide, so hopefully that's coming soon. I've got Conquest of Moria on my plate, which is a little bit more straightforward, but that's going to be us doing a solo mega game, which we've never done before, where we're going to use these solo journaling rules from the One Ring for people to be able to play in a communal solo game. So it's a new experience. And then, because of this Foundry div available to us, maybe we can get Wilder Feast up, maybe by the summertime or something like that, I understand, Stan. Well, I appreciate you being here and hanging out. Well, it's good to know that we know it's good for the Kickstarter. That's the most important part. But Patreon would be trouble. Well, that does suck, but hopefully we can get something out to you, Stan. I'd appreciate it. In the meantime, fingers crossed. This Tunnels and Trolls sponsorship worked really well, and I would love to be able to reach out to some of these. Because we got a nice setup, folks. I'm not saying we're the best people in the world, but we got a nice setup. And I'll be like, hey, I've got an in-person studio with apparently gear. Okay, one of my cameras costs more than all of that min-max group's. One of my cameras costs more than that min-max group's entire audiovisual setup. So, again, I'm not saying that we're any good, but at least we look good. And I'm like, I want to be able to go to some of these groups, maybe like a Darrington Press, some big names, and be like, hey, why don't you drop a couple $1,000 and I'll put a squad together and we'll run your game and we'll play it and we'll make it look good, Um, so no, my studio setup is all Blackmagic design, and my main camera is a Canon. It's a Canon R5. Which is massively overkill, but I just use it because I don't use it for photography anymore, for professional photography, so I might as well use it for something. So it's a glorified webcam, but yeah, it's an R5 body with a 24-70 L lens. So I'm hoping I can pitch some of that, whether it's to Darrington Press. Hey, we'll do a Daggerheart thing. I mean, Sony's look great too. I mean, if I didn't have a Canon, I would have a Sony. I think the Sony A7 line is an amazing line of cameras. So, and I think the FX series looks great too. So, hey, look at that. Evan might support an actual play. Ah, well, that's all right. Darrington Press bucks. There's different scales, Nim. There's different scales, Evan. You know, that's ultimately why I'm a bad business person, Evan. Because I'm like, yeah, I was talking about even like my sponsorship, Tunnels and Trolls, and I was like, it was $500, and they were like, deal, and I was like, good deal for them. But I was like thinking about like somebody else, someone smaller, someone who doesn't have any money and budget. I'm like, yeah, I would want to work. If somebody had literally no budget, and they're like, I can't even afford $500. I was like, okay, I'll cover your game, and we'll link to your thing, and hey, like give me 5% or something, an affiliate link on any conversion. So if I don't convert anything, you don't pay anything. If I convert a certain amount, I get paid $100. Like again, I just want to talk about games. I do that anyways. So there's always a way. If there's a way that we can work out a mutually beneficial situation, I mean, I don't. That's why I did the money back guarantee. Which again, people are like, that seems stupid. Why would you do work and then maybe not get paid for it? And I'm like, because if I talk about someone's game and it doesn't make them any money, I feel like I just stole from them. So, yeah, like I'm happy it worked out so well and that they did make a bunch of money, because it gives me a good thing to take to another person and say, look, I've got the receipts, I've got the proof. But I don't want to be in a situation where like somebody pays me $1,500 and then I only make them $200. I mean, number one, I just feel like that's bad on me, but I also think it's just like it doesn't look good for my brand to do that. So, anyways, but I do think actual plays is a cool edge that we have going for us, because I feel like a lot of actual plays, are just people on Zoom calls, which is fine, but maybe I can offer something that they don't. Right? That's a unique edge that I have. So, all right, everybody. It's late. It's Saturday. Tomorrow. What's tomorrow? Tomorrow's Sunday. What am I doing Sunday? I don't know. But my roommate Amanda is leaving in a couple days. She's going to visit her boyfriend, and she's gonna be gone for like 3 weeks. So I'm gonna have the house to myself. So I'm gonna do a bunch of house repairs and housework and figure out all these mega game stuff and figure out how the hell we can make something that is cool and doesn't suck. And I'm excited. And then I got to start getting ready for NightCon, baby. It's gonna be so cool. I'm so stoked. I hope this works out really well, and I really would love to do my own thing someday. I think like if we can get like 50 or 60 people, I think we could do our own thing. That's like my that's where I want to be. But anyways, I don't want to go like the full like Baron de Rop route, right, and do this like amazing, incredible thing, but like Green Dragon Fest sounds like a ton of work. And like Baron de Rop took a huge risk when he did the first one. Like he could have really taken a bath on that, but I'm glad it worked out for him. And it sounds like it's an amazing experience for people, but it's a very high end experience. And I don't necessarily want to do that. I just want to get people gaming, I just want to get people gaming. That's what I want to do. Yes. You got here just in time for us to be years ago. Well, Kojo, what I'm saying is that like my Torchbearer game was an actual play, right? Because it was just us playing. When would NightCon be in Ohio? When would it be? NightCon Session 0 is happening in June in Columbus, right? At Origins. NightCon Session 1 I don't know. I don't know when it would be, and I don't know that it would necessarily be in Ohio. I mean, I think we would have to pick a place. Obviously, Ohio works well for us because we can get there easily, and our own. We're probably transporting a bunch of stuff, shirts and merch and signs and all this other stuff. It really just comes down to us finding the right spot and the right size and how many people we have going. And like a lot of people have sent me some really cool suggestions and places, but they're just not very practical to travel to, or they're just really expensive. And part of my thing is I kind of try to want to make it cheap, so that more people would come. I would rather make less money and get 100 people to come than make a ton of money and only get 50 people to come. Does that make sense? Like for me, I want to create a gaming environment, Oh, dang. I still got to get that in person. I actually don't own a physical copy of Wilderfeast. I've been to 2 cons since I was gave the game a golden night for most surprising game of 2025. And I haven't seen it. No one carries it. And I guess I could buy it online, but I don't know. It's kind of cool to buy it in person, Hey, Cedar Point is just a stone's throw away from us, and I've been to the point many, many, many times. I am a Cedar Point aficionado. I'm one of those nerds that can tell you the heights of some of the roller coasters. Not anymore because I don't go anymore. But back in the day, I was. So I don't know the new coasters, but we are only 40 minutes, give or take, from Cedar Point. So hey. Fair enough, Gojo. Core book is buying the GM screen for a game you don't own is a bit of a stretch. So, but in any case, I'm really excited. I'm excited to look forward with maybe some future sponsors. Maybe Evan might throw some. Maybe we'll do some Nimble stuff. Maybe we can do something Nimble from NightCon. That'd be kind of cool. Nimble Nights. But it'd be fun. I mean, I'm enjoying this, and as long as I can keep you guys entertained and educated, and we're in this journey of role playing game this together, then that's okay. If I can make a couple bucks on the side and pay my bills while I'm doing it, that's cool. But again, I'm not trying to get rich here. I'm just trying to get by. Agile Monk, thank you so much for your super chat. And I appreciate you, and appreciate you from. I see that you sent me a couple messages as well. But I will definitely take a look at that. Thank you, Lord Kyler. Thank you for supporting the process. Thank you, Dirty Phil, for stopping by to pay your lurking tax while we were struggling for bandwidth. Apparently that fixed it because we did get better after that. Thank you, Level 2 Janitor, for your critique. Thank you, Klopster, for your critique, and thank you, Scotty F. and Avison for kicking us off with tips and super chats to get us going there. Both throwing your support for Shadowdeep, saying how much you love it, and do that. It means a lot to me, and I really, really appreciate you. Thank you, everybody, subscribed and liked. Remember, if you want to support us, and money's tight, like it is for me, you can always support us for free using your Amazon Prime account on twitch.tv/nightslastcall. Even though we're not streaming live on Twitch right now, but because we're having bandwidth problems. But hopefully that's been resolved, so we can hopefully fix it in the future. All right, that's going to do it for me. There is only a 30% chance that I will go live tomorrow. But we are on the docket to be doing a bunch more first looks. Pico is coming up. We're going to try to get Tuesday. We're going to do Across 1,000 Dead Worlds, which is a solo game that was sponsored by our buddy Kaz. Pico is going to be coming up. So we're going to try to get 2 of those done. At some point here in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have Level 2 Janitor on to talk a little bit more TechQuest and get down into some of the class design, which is going to be a lot of fun. Love having them on. And at some point, I think Evan has to get, I think we had a tip goal to get Evan back on here. So we're going to get Evan back on here, Bob back on here, Smith back on here. I'm going to get Bob, Tim, and Bob's brother Danny back on to at some point to finish our One Ring. Now that I'm back from all my travels in March, we do. If you remember, we left off in the Orc Lair. And they still have to confront the Great Wolf Queen of the North, which will probably kill them all because I don't think they have any resources left. But hey, it's okay. And yeah, we'll see what happens next time on Knights, a Last Call. Good night, everybody.